Hi folks, Juju here. Big shout out to Kaden Gardner, the genius behind the Kadenverse. If you like this story, go check out this other video by Kaden, which is also a story that takes place in the Kadenverse. Link will be in the description. April 7th, 1899. You think God has a plan for us? My dad always seemed to think so. Look where that got him. Stuck in his own bed, dying of tuberculosis. It's a shit way to go. I think about him a lot these days. He was so stubborn in the end. I don't think he ever even doubted his faith. I, however, couldn't help myself. It was hard seeing him like that. The man had been there for me for so many years. Seeing him on the brink of death was just painful. I can remember the last time I saw him. He was pale and had blood on his lips. Yet, he still managed a smile when he saw me come in the room. "God's got a plan for you, Kenny," he said to me. "God's got big plans for you." He died 2 days later, but those words stuck with me for some reason in the weeks following. We were chasing down a pair of killers, and I missed the funeral. Their names were Hector and Raul Pedro, or as the law preferred, the Pedro brothers. We had been tracking the Pedro brothers for 6 weeks when we came to a stop in a small town on the southern border of New Mexico. We weren't there long enough for me to even remember its name. It wasn't much but a saloon, a hotel, and dirt all in the same stretch of wooden buildings. It was noon when we rode in. The sun beat down hard at our necks. I took my dark leather hat off and brushed the thick layers of sweat from my forehead. "Atkins, I swear to God if we don't catch these boys soon," I complained as I put my hat back on. Atkins popped his jawline and turned to face me. Our hits were bobbing with each of our horses' steps. "Relax, boy. We'll get him soon enough." Atkins is a large, brawny man. The first impression I got when he found me was that he was going to be this no-nonsense, straight-to-the-chase, scary man. He had served in the Civil War as a colonel on the northern side. That was where he'd gotten the giant pink scar across the right side of his face. He wore a dirty black duster coat over a bandolier of bronze-colored bullets for the repeating rifle that was slung across his back. Truthfully though, Atkins is one of the smartest and most patient men that I've ever met when it came to dealing with criminals. I guess it helped that most men shit their pants when he approaches them with any malice. If I was completely honest, I probably would as well. The man stands about 6'7". I watched as he stroked his green-black goatee and spurred onward. Our first stop was the saloon. The saloon we'd entered wasn't very big. It wasn't very nice either. The tables looked old and cracked. The chairs were wobbly. It was also nowhere close to busy. There were maybe 4 men inside, and all of them cast suspicious eyes on us the moment we walked in. The establishment was quiet. We both casually walked to the bar. I was trying desperately to ignore the hairs raising on the back of my neck. I wanted to turn my eyes behind us. "Calm down, kid," Atkins said as he leaned against the bar and looked at me with a smile. I'm a 22-year-old from Texas, and this was only my 4th assignment as a U.S. Marshal. I'd been recruited after I'd been involved in a gunfight in Oklahoma, one in which I killed 3 of the most wanted men in the state when they tried to steal my horse. A day later, when Atkins found me in shock, still standing over the bodies, he'd recruited me. Atkins always says I'm young and paranoid, especially on a job like this. The Pedro brothers are supposedly notorious when it came to butchering whores in brothels. They had torn a path of destruction from Louisiana to Texas when we were finally given the case. They had murdered 27 whores, 7 bartenders, 3 members of US law enforcement, and apparently some poor farmers' chickens, 30 of them. Why that last one was on the wanted poster? I don't know. I couldn't help but be a little paranoid. These men were clearly dangerous. But it didn't seem to matter to Atkins. The aging marshal had seen more than his fair share of dangerous men. They all ended up in the same place. The bartender was a fat, German-looking guy called Steiner. He was a cheerful man that didn't stop smiling when he poured Atkins a shot of whiskey. Atkins smiled back at him and dumped the shot down his throat. "You wouldn't have happened to see two Hispanic gentlemen around here maybe around 2 days ago? Said they were just passing through. One of them got a crooked eyeball." Steiner thought for a second before shaking his head. Atkins grumbled before turning around. His eyes scanned the room. None of the men who had watched us walk inside were Hispanic. Atkins reached into one of the pockets of his duster coat and pulled a crumpled piece of paper. He flattened it out on the bar and showed it to everyone. "This is the wanted poster for the brothers Hector and Raul Pedro. As you can see, they're worth $5,000 dead and $3,000 alive. Anyone here seen either of them? Take a good look. I'm only gonna ask once." The men in the bar all stared at us. None of them were very pleased by our presence. None more so than the man sitting to my right. He slowly stood from his seat and put his cigar out on the wooden table. He was a shorter man with a thick brown mustache and circular glasses. "With all due respect, we don't like law enforcement around these parts. They're always stirring up trouble." "Well, you guys give us some information, then we'll be on our way in the morning," said Atkins as he adjusted the piece of paper. "I don't think you understand," the man growled as he pulled a revolver from his belt. "This here ain't your territory. It belongs to the Tippis Mining Corporation. If we need law enforcement, we'll call law enforcement." Atkins looked at me and smiled. My hand was already resting on the ivory handle of my revolver. All three of the other men in the bar stood up with their weapons drawn on us. "You guys sure you don't recognize these men?" I asked. "It'll be much easier on all of us if you tell the truth," Atkins said. "I think you men need to leave." A German accent rang out from behind us. I turned to face the bartender and was met with a double-barrel shotgun. I raised both my hands up. Atkins smiled and nodded. He dropped a few coins on the bar. "Fair enough. This is for the whiskey." Atkins turned to walk away and motioned for me to follow. We both walked out of the building and back into the street. The sun immediately blinded me. "What now?" I asked. "Well, I'd say let's move on to the next town. But the next town is in the Tippis mining territory." "Tippis mining territory?" I asked. "The Tippis Mining Corporation owns 70 to 80 mines from here to Colorado. Any town within 20 miles of their mines is probably bankrolled by them." We walked up to our horses, and I saddled up. "Why don't they like law enforcement? And how in the hell are we supposed to do our jobs?" Atkins shrugged. "I don't know, but I'd imagine if we can find the mine, we can find whoever the Tippis Corporation has running the towns in this area. I'm sure they'll be a bit more understanding when they know what we're dealing with." April 9th, 1899. We found the mine as the sun began cresting the plains behind us. We'd spent the entire night riding, and my eyes were heavy. The mines in this area were dug into the base of a very large cliff. I didn't see much of them because we didn't go near them. We wandered into the makeshift town they'd set up. The main office building was a small wooden cabin that sat atop a hill that was overlooking the mines. There were around 20 to 30 workers moseying around the camp. They were about to start another day's worth of work. We were greeted at the office by a shirtless bald man that looked about 20. He was tall and muscular, like one of the strong men from the circus. He introduced himself as Teddy as we walked up to him. The first thing I noticed about him, other than his lack of clothing, was that he was almost as tall as Atkins. He and Atkins shook hands. "Folks in town been talking about a couple marshals wandering around. I figured y'all would show up here soon. We don't typically like law enforcement wandering around our designated areas." "Well, technically, your designated areas belong to the states of Arizona, Oklahoma, Texas, and Colorado," Atkins said, putting his hands on his hips. Teddy laughed. We've got a deal worked out with the governors of all them states. Now, you seem to know a lot about our little corporation. You wouldn't happen to be Marshal Roy Atkins? Atkins smirked. Who's asking? Well, if you were, I might be willing to let you operate, seeing as how you killed the Rider gang. Teddy chuckled. Then, that's exactly who I am, said Atkins. I was a little stunned. I'd heard stories about Atkins' little adventure with the Rider family. Apparently, they'd been harassing mining shipments for several months before the Tippis Mining Corporation finally reached out and asked for help. He'd found the Riders camped out near El Paso and killed every single one of them. Teddy smiled widely. Well then, who might you fellas be looking for? Atkins reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled wanted poster, then handed it to Teddy. The Pedro brothers, I answered. Teddy looked at the wanted poster and mouthed the words as he read it. 30 chickens? Why'd they put that on here? Asked Teddy. Both Atkins and I shrugged. Well, looking at these other crimes on here, I do not want these men walking into any of my towns. I'll write up an order, get the townsfolk to leave you alone. I'll also have our private security to keep an eye out. Well, thank you very much, Atkins said. Teddy nodded. You two need a place to stay. There's another town about 10 miles south of here. It's got a decent inn and brothel. Hell, might even be where your boys are headed. I'll keep that in mind, said Atkins. With that, we left. It took us a few hours of riding in the grueling sun before we made it to the town they called Spring, Arizona. It wasn't a large settlement, but it was bigger than the last town we'd wandered into, maybe around 30 to 40 wooden buildings. The inn is nice, I'll give it that. I'm sitting on the bed writing this in a black leather-bound journal that my dad gave me as a birthday present last year. I never even thought about using it until after he passed on. I don't know why, but it makes me feel a bit closer to him. April 10th, 1899. I woke up this morning to a loud banging on my in-room door. I got up a little dreary-eyed as I answered the door. An older man, wearing an expensive-looking suit, stood there with an annoyed look on his thin, bony face. I looked this man up and down. He had both his hands in his pockets, and his eyes were fixated on me. Can I help you? I asked. Is your name Ken Sullivan? He asked. I nodded. Yeah? He looked me up and down, like he was studying me. He grumbled. Can I help you? I asked again. This time I was getting a little irritated. Watch out for the locals. They're not what they seem, the man said in a stern voice. I wanted to ask him what the hell he meant when the alarm clock next to my bed started ringing. I instinctively turned to look at it, and then back to the man, but the man just wasn't there anymore. I honestly think I may have imagined the entire thing, but it still bothered me. About 2 hours later, I met Atkins outside of the town's brothel or saloon. A large 2-story building with a balcony and swinging doors at the entrance. It was loud when we walked inside. There was a man on the piano who was just going to town with a song I didn't recognize. The bar patrons seemed to be having the time of their lives. I figure if they're here, this is where we'd find them, Atkins yelled over the music. We both walked over to the bar, and Atkins ordered a shot of whiskey. The place was crowded, more crowded than one would think a town in this area would be. I rolled my eyes and sat on one of the wooden stools. If they didn't just run down to Mexico, I replied. Atkins looked at me and smiled while the bartender poured him a shot. He dumped it down his throat and turned back toward the crowd. Kid, you need to be a bit more optimistic, he said with a smile. I sighed as I ordered a shot. It had been a long past few weeks with the untimely death of my father. Truth is, I was still a bit sour from it. Who wouldn't be? We both sat calmly in silence for a second or two while the music played. I spun around in my chair when I heard the door open. Then, the music suddenly came to an abrupt halt. Teddy walked into the room, his footsteps thundering under him. "Where the fuck is Hiroshi?" the man yelled. Atkins and I looked at each other. Atkins' eyebrow was raised. We watched as everyone in the brothel all looked at each other awkwardly. I examined the people in the room. There must have been 30 to 40. They were all from various places. Some were Mexicans, some were white, some were Asian, but all were working for the mining company. "No one seems to know? Okay. Well, if Hiroshi isn't found within the next 20 minutes, I'm cutting everyone's pay in half." Just like that, all the men inside the bar scrambled to their feet and sloppily shuffled out the swinging doorway. Once the place was empty, Teddy turned to us and smiled. "Sorry you folk had to see that." "What was that about?" I asked. Teddy put his hands on his hips and sighed. "Well, it's a long story. Hiroshi is, or was in charge of overseeing transportation of some of the mine's silver. But the last few days, he's not shown up to work, and some of our silver's gone missing." "You think he stole it?" asked Atkins. "That's what I intend to find out. Big boss don't like losing money," Teddy said. I looked around the bar. I could see the stairway along the wall that led to the rooms where the sporting women earned their money. A woman stood at the top of the stairway. Her eyes were fixated on me. She seemed to have a sort of hunger in her eyes. One that a coyote would give a rabbit. I didn't like prostitutes. I never liked prostitutes. This woman wasn't any different. She was beautiful, yes, with long black hair that came down past her shoulders and emerald green eyes. She wore a pink silk dress that almost looked more like a nightgown than anything. She glided down the staircase with ease and walked straight up to Teddy. "I thought law enforcement wasn't allowed in Tippis territory," she asked. Her voice had a foreign accent to it that I want to say sounded English, but I've never met anyone from England before, so I'm not sure. Teddy looked slightly surprised to see her. "Madame Moria, I wasn't expecting you," Teddy said. Moria looked at him and then back at me. "Why are they here?" she asked. "They're looking for two brothers that like to murder prostitutes and chickens," said Teddy. Moria grinned as she looked me up and down. "You don't say." Teddy only nodded in response. "Well, I'm sure they have your permission to wander around. Your word is as good as my father's after all," she said as she fixed her gaze on Atkins. I didn't think it would be a problem. After all, this is Marshall Roy." "Marshall Roy Atkins. I know. We've met." It was then that I noticed Atkins' face. The man was paralyzed. I wasn't sure if he was scared or if the blood was rushing to the wrong head. His face was pink, and he looked like he hadn't taken a breath. "What's wrong, Marshall?" I thought you'd been shot in the chest," he asked. Moria shrugged. "I survived," she said with a smile. "Now, who's this young man with the pretty blue eyes?" she asked as she turned to me. That's Marshall Sullivan." I've never seen Atkins get flustered in my life. I've seen him angry, sad, happy, and drunk, but I've never seen him at a loss of words. His eyes were still on Moria, even as she turned back to me. "Mr. Sullivan, what can you tell me about the, what are their names again?" she asked. "The Pedro brothers," said Teddy. "The Pedro brothers. What can you tell me about the Pedro brothers?" she asked. I looked at Atkins, who nodded at me. "They're dangerous, they're smart, and they'll kill every young lady in here if they get the chance," I said. Moria nodded in response. "I'm sure." "Very well then. Happy hunting," she said as she turned around to face Teddy. She walked up to him and whispered something in his ear just as the saloon doors flew open. Two men dragged a drunk-looking Asian man inside and tossed him at Teddy's feet. "Here he is, sir," one of the men said. Teddy reached into his pocket and pulled a watch out. He flipped it open shrugged, and closed it. With only seconds to spare, he said as he motioned his head for the men to leave. Hiroshi was on his hands and knees. He had a short beard and scraggly black hair. His clothes were filthy as well. Moria looked down on him and smiled. "Is this the one who's been stealing our silver?" she asked. "We actually don't know," Teddy said. "Then figure it out. I'll be in my room," she said before gliding off. My eyes turned to Atkins, who was still transfixed on her, then to Teddy, who was squatting in front of the now crawling Hiroshi. "Hiroshi, you smell like ass," he said as he pulled the man to his feet and brushed them off. "Where have you been?" Teddy asked. "I don't remember," Hiroshi grumbled. "That's not a good enough answer. We're missing an entire wagon of silver. Now, I know you ain't no thief." Hiroshi squinted hard as he stumbled a step backward. "There was a woman. She stopped us between the mine and Moxie." "A woman? Okay. Did a woman steal the silver?" Teddy said as he put his hands on Hiroshi's shoulders. "No, she wanted something else." Hiroshi straightened himself up. He looked like he was getting his senses back together. "What was that? Where did the rest of your crew go?" asked Teddy. Hiroshi's eyes grew large as his exhales quickened. "The Gunslinger. I shot him 14 times, but he didn't die," Hiroshi exclaimed. "Can you describe him?" I asked. Hiroshi turned and looked at me. His eyes seemed a bit dazed. "Who are you?" "Marshal Sullivan." He turned to Teddy, then back to me. "You guys need to call in the army. We couldn't stop him." "Hiroshi, calm down, okay? We need to find our silver, or Vlad himself is going to come down here. You remember what happened last time?" Hiroshi composed himself a bit and took a deep breath. Atkins turned to the bartender and ordered another shot. He handed it to Hiroshi. Hiroshi downed it and took another deep breath. "There's not much to describe. It all happened so fast. I think he had a Confederate uniform on." Atkins and I looked at each other again. Then Teddy, who crossed his arms. "Okay, I'm gonna gather up the boys. You remember where it happened? Can you take us there?" Teddy asked. Hiroshi flinched a bit. "You don't understand. You can't kill whatever he is." "If he's wearing some kind of armor, then we'll bring the 500 nitros," said Teddy as he looked at us. "You think this could be the Pedro brothers?" he asked. "I ain't ever heard of no Mexican wearing a Confederate uniform," Atkins said. "Plus, this doesn't fit their MO. They don't rob people, they just kill them," I said. "Chickens too," Atkins added. "Sounds like a couple of great guys. Are you sure they didn't go to Mexico?" Teddy asked. Atkins frowned. "The bounty on them in Mexico is twice as much as it is here. They've got to be around here somewhere. They know that law enforcement isn't typically allowed here." "Well, I'll tell you what. You boys ride with me to go find this wagon. Then I'll turn my boys loose to see if we can't catch some Pedro brothers," Teddy said with a smile. "I thought you were already gonna do that," I asked. "I said they'd keep an eye out. Now, they'd be actively hunting your boys." "That would speed things up," Atkins said as he turned to me. "Well, that settles it. We'll leave as soon as this one's sober," Teddy said as he shook our hands. About an hour later, Atkins and I still sat at the bar, which had gradually grown a small crowd since Teddy left with Hiroshi. Atkins was watching his shot glass closely. "What's the deal with you and that Moria woman?" I asked. Atkins chuckled. "You remember the part in the story where Bill Ryder executed a hostage? The one who took a double barrel to the chest?" I asked. "That was her." I blinked twice. She was the reason Atkins killed the entire gang. "I don't understand. How the hell is she alive?" I asked. Atkins shrugged. "I ain't got a clue. You don't just survive buckshot to the chest." Atkins dumped the shot down his throat, then turned to look at the empty staircase. It wasn't a longing look he gave, more one of curiosity. That was when the swinging doors came open and a young Hispanic man walked in. One who looked exactly like one of the men on Atkins' wanted poster. Raul Pedro. "Atkins?" I mumbled. "I see him," Atkins said as he stood up. Raul was a short man. He was a whole head shorter than me. Rumor had it, Hector was the brawn and he was the brains of their operation. Raul walked straight up to the bar and ordered a glass of scotch. He didn't look like a mass murderer. If I were to take a guess, I'd say he looked more like a doctor or a businessman. He wore a nice suit and round spectacles. Atkins walked straight up behind him and put his marshal badge down in front of him. Raul finished his glass while keeping his eyes on the badge. "Where's your brother?" Atkins asked. Raul put the cup down, then spun around to face Atkins. "I don't know." Atkins grumbled. "I'm being honest, I haven't seen him since last night." "I don't believe you," I said as I walked up to them. "Well, regardless, the wanted poster says dead or alive. How you go is your choice," said Atkins. "Are you seriously going to kill me in front of all these good people?" "Last I saw Hector, he was going upstairs with one of the whores." "Which one?" asked Atkins. Raul shrugged. "Hector does what he wants." Atkins squinted at him, then looked at me. "Go find Moria. Tell her there's a big man up there that likes to butcher women." My eyes caught Raul smiling at me. That fucking sick psychopath. I turned and walked toward the stairwell when the crack of a gunshot rang out from upstairs. It was followed by a loud scream. I took off in a sprint up the stairway. It led me into a long hallway with crimson carpet. Doorway to bedrooms lined the left side, while windows covered in scarlet silk curtains lined the other. My eyes reached the end of the hallway, where a big Hispanic man panicked as he stumbled through the doorway. His pants were halfway down and his shirt was missing. His pistol was aimed back inside the room, where he fired another shot. I drew one of my guns and aimed them at him. "Hector!" I shouted. The man didn't hear me. I moved in closer without lowering my gun. Hector staggered up to his feet. That was when I noticed the blood coming from his neck. Someone had put up an unexpected fight. "Hector Pedro!" I shouted again. He turned to me with terror in his eyes. That was when the door opened between us, and Moria stepped out. "What is going on?" she growled. Hector didn't hesitate. He grabbed her from behind and aimed his pistol at the top of her head. "Drop your gun," he shouted. Moria didn't really have a reaction, other than annoyance. She rolled her eyes before looking straight at me. "Drop your gun," Hector repeated. "Okay," I said calmly, as I slowly put my gun on the ground with one hand, while my other hand reached for the ivory handle of my second gun. I could hear Hector breathing heavily. "You don't want to do this," I said calmly. "Shut the fuck up," Hector sneered. "Okay," I said as my gun hit the ground. The moment it touched, I pulled my other pistol, aimed and fired. Hector's head snapped backward, and he crumpled to the ground. Moria turned and looked at the body, then back to me. "I think you're a little faster than your partner," she commented. "My daddy was a Texas Ranger," I responded as I walked up to her. I squatted next to the body as the footsteps clunked up the stairs and into the hallway behind me. Moria walked into the open door that Hector had emerged from. "Anna, are you okay?" I heard the voice asked. "I'm fine. He just got the drop on me." A foreign voice that wasn't Moria responded. "What happened?" Atkins asked. "I'm not entirely sure." The blood stain on Hector's neck looked to me like a bite wound, one that meant the woman had fought back. Clearly, he hadn't been expecting it. I wondered if the woman had attacked first. I sighed. It didn't matter now. One Pedro brother was dead. We had the other. Raul had dropped to his knees when he'd seen his brother's body. He didn't cry. He didn't grimace. He just sighed and looked over at me. "Before this day is over, I'm going to rip your throat out," he said in a calm voice. I chuckled as I got to my feet. Moria walked out of the doorway and leaned against it. I turned to her and smiled. "Ma'am, I'd ask if you're okay, but you look more annoyed than anything." Moria gave me a sarcastic smile. He shot at my sister and woke me up. "Well, he ain't got no brain no more," Atkins said as he nudged the body with his foot. "Does this mean you two are leaving?" she asked. "Well, if you guys had a jail for this one, we'd love to help you out with your missing silver. I figure I owe you for... well," Atkins started. "Getting me shot?" Moria asked. Atkins nodded. "We have a jail. It's in the security office, 2 buildings down. I'd take you myself, but we have a mess to clean up." Teddy didn't gather his security forces until about 6 a.m. From what we've heard, Hiroshi had spent the day and night throwing up every meal he'd eaten from the last few days. We rode up, and Hiroshi greeted us. He seemed a bit soberer now. He's got a backpack with a family sword tied to one side of it. I think he called it a katana. I'll just call it a sword. Teddy seemed happy to see us. He shook Atkins' hand when we rode up. "I got 27 men. The location Hiroshi described is a few miles out. We'll get there and go to work. Oh, and Moria wanted me to thank you guys for yesterday." Atkins nodded, and we rode out. I also forgot to mention in yesterday's notes that we dropped Raoul off at the jail. He's got his own cell now. He also didn't get to keep his promise to rip my throat out by the end of the day. We rode for a few hours in the blazing heat. We were all covered in sweat and smelled like ass. We made it to the scene of the crime, where we actually found the wagon full of its silver. Teddy jumped off his horse while Atkins rode around the crime scene. The place smelled like death and rotting flesh. The bodies had been cooking in the heat. "There are a lot of bullet casings around here," Atkins said. "I told you, we shot him. He didn't go down," said Hiroshi. I rode past one of the bodies. It looked like it had been hit with a cannon. The man had been blown clean in half. His entrails were spread all over the blood-stained sand. "What kind of guns did you say this man was using?" I asked. Hiroshi thought for a second. "Looked like 2 revolvers," said Hiroshi. Atkins grumbled. I jumped off my horse. Atkins and Teddy did the same as we all met near the wagon. The men Teddy had brought had formed sort of a perimeter. "So why kill everyone without taking the silver?" I asked. Teddy climbed into the wagon and looked around. "Was there anything else up here?" Atkins asked. Teddy thought for a moment. "Hiroshi?" "Yes, sir." "Where did you guys keep your maps of the territory?" Teddy asked. My eyes grew big as I turned to Atkins. "A wooden box under the seat," Hiroshi said as his white horse stopped next to the wagon. Teddy looked under the seat and groaned. "What box?" "Wait, why would they want a map of your territory?" I asked. Teddy sat down on the wagon seat and groaned. Well shit. If they're looking for a map, they'd have information about most of our transportation routes, locations of our most profitable mines, all the information about our company." Atkins grumbled. That was when we heard the sound of a sudden twig snap. A man stumbled from the brush next to us. We all raised our guns at him. "Stop right there," Hiroshi called out. The fat German man fell to his knees. "Steiner?" asked Teddy as he ran straight up to him. Steiner gasped something in German. He was weeping as Teddy knelt down in front of him. "What happened?" Teddy asked. "A dead man killed everyone in our town," muttered Steiner. Teddy turned to us with a raised brow. "Shit." We all rode back to the small town we'd been kicked out of a few days prior. The town had a population of 26. We found 25 bodies strung out all over the town. We'd even found the man who had threatened us at the bar. He had been blown into 3 pieces in the saloon doorway. "What the hell happened here?" asked Atkins. I shrugged. Neither of us had ever seen anything close to the carnage displayed before us. We all walked into the saloon, where we found even more blood and body parts. Written on the wall in gore was a message. "Mommy's back." April 12th, 1899. We spent last night just outside of the blood-soaked town. I can't imagine many of us slept very well. I know for a fact that I didn't. I may have gotten 30 minutes of sleep. Every second of it was plagued by dreams of the suited men that had shown up at my doorway. "Don't trust Moria," his voice said. I was jolted awake by the sound of a wolf howling in the distance. I sat up and looked down at the campfire that Atkins poked at. "Hey kid, trouble sleeping?" Atkins asked. I nodded as I went and sat next to him. It was peaceful tonight. The almost full moon was shining brightly in the sky. The cool breeze carried with it the smell of decay from the nearby town. "Roy, what have we gotten ourselves into?" I asked. "I don't know yet." "You saw those bodies. The only thing I know of that can damage a body like that is a .54 caliber or an elephant gun. Elephant guns are typically double-barrel. I doubt they'd been able to get that many shots off," Atkins said as he stared into the flames. Atkins was a lot of things, and stupid wasn't one of them. We sat quietly at the fire for a little bit. My eyes found one of Teddy's men set up at the perimeter. He had a rifle shouldered as he stared out into the darkness. "What do you think the message meant?" "Mommy's back," Atkins asked. I sighed. Someone's got a bone to pick with the Tippis family. "Who though?" Atkins asked. "Every other mining company this side of the Mississippi," Teddy chimed in as he left the bushes. "You couldn't sleep either?" asked Atkins. Teddy scoffed. "Sleeping is easier when there ain't ghosts with guns wandering around." "Ghosts with guns?" I asked. Teddy tilted his head to one side. "You heard Steiner. He said the gunman was a dead man." I took a second to think about it. People did have a tendency to mix up the truth in difficult situations. But so far, we'd only seen the aftermath of whatever was rampaging through the Arizona brush. I sent a messenger to tell Moria what we found. I only hope she don't get her daddy down here. Teddy said. "Big man Tippis himself." Atkins chuckled. "What's he like?" I asked. Teddy shrugged. "He's ruthless. You guys ever wonder why we don't like law enforcement?" My eyes widened. Was this man about to out his boss for some nefarious crimes? "It's 'cause of him. Not very many people have ever met him and lived. Besides his daughters at least. I used to sit around and debate with the last boss about whether the man existed or not. I learned the hard way that those conversations weren't worth having." "What happened?" I asked. "I got promoted. My boss disappeared." "Why not contact the authorities?" asked Atkins. "This is Tippis country. This whole area is his empire. Plus, the pay ain't bad. I've almost got enough to take back home to my wife and daughter. Maybe we'll get him out of the city." Atkins and I just nodded. Neither of us had any kids. I don't want any, and Atkins had only one true love in his entire life, which was how he kept finding himself in situations like this. Another howl sounded off in the distance. "I didn't know there were wolves out here," I said. Teddy got to his feet, one hand gripped tight around his double-barreled elephant gun. "Mexican gray wolves. They're a damn nuisance," Teddy mumbled. "Sit down, man. They sound miles away," said Atkins. Teddy looked down at us, took a deep breath and sat down. You ever heard the story of that bounty hunter with those pet wolves? He asked. I can't say I have, Atkins responded. Major legend around these parts. Some say his mama was a Comanche, and his father was a Confederate captain who deserted for her. When the soldiers found out and found him and her, they hung the couple from a tree, and left the child to be eaten by wolves. Fuck, I grumbled. But the wolves didn't eat the kid. They raised him. He came up a savage until a doctor found him, taught him to be civilized. But rumor says he still runs around with the pack, hunting the Confederates that killed his parents. They call him Wyatt Walker, the man who walks with wolves. That what you're getting all scared of? Asked Atkins. Nah, I'm allergic to dogs. Teddy laughed. You more of a cat person? I asked. Teddy scoffed. No. I shrugged. We spent the rest of the night talking about nothing around the campfire. When morning finally came, we all got up and took the wagon back to Spring. We got there around noon. Moria was waiting for us with a giant white sun hat on her head. I looked over at Atkins and rolled my eyes. She actually looked worried. Atkins stepped off of his horse and walked up to her and Teddy. I got your message, Moria said with a hint of dread in her voice. Teddy only exhaled. Can Hiroshi describe the woman this gunslinger was with? Teddy motioned for Hiroshi, who dismounted and headed over to them. Yes, ma'am? Hiroshi asked. Tell her about the woman. Hiroshi blinked a few times, like he needed to think. She was, about my height. Dark hair, weird makeup, especially around her eyes. Moria sighed. Did it look like she had black paint in a line across her eyes? Hiroshi's eyes grew large. Yes. Moria swallowed hard. You know who this is? Asked Atkins. Her name is Lilith. She's an old associate of my father's that I'm sure that he would love to reconnect with. Well, she's responsible for the murders of around 35 people. She needs to be brought in, said Atkins. Moria laughed. You would only die trying. Teddy, bring all of our security forces back to Spring. It's only a matter of time before she shows up here. Moria turned her attention to Atkins and me. I would recommend that you two stay in town for a few days. There's no telling what kind of things are lurking around the roads at night. That was when we met Jack, a tall, slender man with a black trench coat and a specially made vest, loaded with fancy ivory-handled knives. He rode up on a horse with a smile across his thin face. His green eyes watched Moria closely from behind. He stepped off the horse and walked up behind her. Hello, darling, he sneered to Moria. Husband? Moria greeted. Jack snapped his head in Teddy's direction. Hello, Ted. I hear you've gotten yourself into some trouble, he said. Who are you? I asked. Jack snapped his head in my direction. I'm Jack. I'll be in charge of protecting the prospering miners and their families in this town. At least, until Vlad gets here with Darius. Moria took a sigh of relief. Vlad is coming? She asked. Left New York as soon as the telegraph arrived. I could hear Teddy shuffle uncomfortably. Jack looked him up and down, before brushing his long greasy black hair behind his ear. Jack smiled from ear to ear. Don't worry, human. He's not coming for you. Human? I mumbled to myself. Jack's head snapped back to me. He only smiled and turned to walk away. I looked at Atkins, who had an eyebrow raised at me. He grumbled. A few minutes later, Atkins and I decided that we didn't want to encounter whoever this Lilith person was on the roads at night. We were better off waiting to escort Raoul to Dallas until after whatever was happening in the city ended. Spring is a decent size for a mining town. It's where all the miners' families live. There are around 40 large wooden buildings that range from gun stores to hotels to apartments. There is even a small school. There isn't a church though, which slightly bothers me. What kind of town doesn't have a church, especially all the way out here? Atkins and I went to the security building, where we found Raoul's cell empty, his white sheets covered in crimson. Atkins muttered to himself as the man inside sighed. "I'm sorry, sir. We didn't know he had a knife on him. The man slit his wrists shortly after you guys left." "Why weren't we told about this? Where's his body?" Atkins demanded. "It's in a coffin out back, waiting for you guys to leave with it and the other brother. A lot is going on around here. People are scared," the man said. Atkins turned and looked at me. "What do we do?" I asked. "Well, I'm not sure there's anyone in the city I trust right now. But we can't leave, not until this Lilith has been dealt with." I grumbled. Then we went back to our rooms at the inn. We both were tired and in desperate need of a nap. I walked into my room and tossed my hat on the bed. "Hello, Ken," a voice greeted from the closet door. My eyes widened as I pulled my peacemaker and aimed it. A much paler Raoul leaned on the doorframe, a wicked smile across his face and a small knife that was soaked in crimson in his hand. "What the fuck?" I asked. That was when I noticed his teeth. His canines were sharpened and sticking out past his other teeth. They were stained with crimson. I tightened my grip on my pistol. "Do you know how much blood is in the human body?" he asked. I didn't respond. I was too busy wondering whether I should shoot him in the head or chest. "About 1.5 gallons. Do you want to know how much you'll have left after I leave here tonight?" I fired my weapon. The gunshot rang out, and the round put a hole in Raoul's suit. Crimson blood seeped through onto the blue fabric. But Raoul didn't flinch. He only looked down at his chest and then back at me. He smiled, even wider now. "I made you a promise, gringo," he hissed as he started to walk toward me. I raised my pistol and fired again. His head snapped to the side as a bullet whisked through his eye socket. He yelped in pain as his hand shot to his eyeball. I fired again, and another shot went through his neck. Then another, then another, then another. Twice in the back and once in the stomach. I'd shot him 6 times, and he hadn't gone down. He stopped dancing when I finally ran out of bullets. He was screaming and cursing in Spanish. He took a deep breath and turned to face me. There was blood pouring from where his left eye used to be. "I'm going to fucking murder you," he growled. I pulled my other pistol and went to aim it at his head. But before I got it up, Raoul had somehow closed the distance between us. His knife had found itself planted in my shoulder. I cried out in pain. His free hand had grabbed into my wrist with the loaded gun. He lifted me and slammed me against the wall. We were face to face now as I struggled against his strength. I even tried whacking him in the face with my empty revolver. It worked once, but the second time I swung it, he removed the knife from my shoulder and shoved it through my wrist and into the wall. I cried out again in pain. I'd been partially crucified to the wall. "I told you," he growled as he took hold of my neck and began to squeeze. My vision very quickly went blurry. That was when the door suddenly flew open. The last thing I saw before I blacked out was the figure of a woman flying through the doorway. April 14th, 1899. I only just woke up this morning and wrote that last entry. I found myself under the care of Spring's local physician, Dr. Ian Gurney. He's an older man with a limp who walks with a cane. He's a good man. He said that whatever Raoul had coated his blood in had knocked me unconscious. I sat up on the bed, my shoulder and wrist still stinging like hell. The first person I noticed was Atkins leaning in the doorway with a concerned look on his face. "Well, look who decided to wake up," he laughed. "Hey Roy," I groaned. "Am I gonna have to stop leaving you alone?" he asked. "Nah, I had him. He almost killed you after bringing a knife to a gunfight? Asked Atkins. I thought for a minute. Flashes of the man's teeth and unwavering strength passed through my mind. He was fast, like ungodly fast, I said. Atkins raised a brow. Ain't no way in hell he was faster than you. I ain't seen no man faster than you. I'm not sure he was a man, I groaned. Atkins smacked his lips. That's what that woman said too. Woman? I asked. Yeah, the woman who saved you. She killed Raoul with a few rounds to the heart. Said her name is Sonia. Atkins said. Where is she? I asked. Atkins shrugged. Left before I could ask any more questions. I raised a brow at him. You let her walk away? Atkins' shoulders slumped a little bit, and he exhaled. She said she'd get back in touch after you woke up. Apparently, she's not supposed to be here. What is she, law enforcement? I asked. Kid, do I look like I know? Now, don't you go falling in love. We got work to do. I lifted my wrist. Not sure how much good I'll be with one hand. Roy shrugged. You were always faster with your right. I got up and got my clothes on, and the dog put my arm in a sling before we headed outside. We didn't make it 2 steps out the door when Teddy was already in front of us. You doing alright, boy? He asked. I'll live. I would like to know how Raoul fooled your guard into thinking he was dead, I said. I'm trying to figure that out myself. My man said he had no pulse. The images of Raoul's sharpened teeth flashed in my head. Where is his brother's body? I asked. In a coffin behind the jail. Why? We arrived 30 seconds later at an empty coffin. What the Sam hell is going on in this town? Atkins groaned. I double-checked my pistol to make sure it was still loaded. Teddy babbled for a few seconds before taking his hat off. We need to go see Moria, Teddy grunted. Flashes of the man in the suit went through my head. Don't trust Moria, his voice said. How is this possible? Ken blew his fucking brains out, Atkins asked. Teddy shrugged. I squatted down next to the empty coffin. I scanned the sand for a split second, until I found what I was looking for. Footprints that would have belonged to a big man that led out into the surrounding desert. I pulled my pistol and cocked it. Hey Ted, I asked. What? You still got that elephant gun? I asked with a smirk. Yeah, it's on my horse. Why? You may want to bring it. Then we began following the trail left by our late friend's corpse. We followed it for a few miles and into an area with more brush than sand, where we followed his tracks out toward the side of a small cliff, which Teddy recognized as a place with a small but expansive cave system. I really hoped the tracks didn't lead in there. It was a stupid thought. But I ended up getting my wish when we found Hector half naked at the mouth of a cave, his brain still hanging from the back of his head. He locked eyes with us as we emerged from the brush. We all came to a sudden stop. His face was smeared with fresh blood. He had a dead coyote in his hands that he pulled in closer as we approached. I raised my pistol at him. Hector! I called out. That was when the man hissed at me, then charged. I unloaded my revolver, and every round hit him in the chest. Atkins fired multiple shots from his rifle. Then came the thundering noise of Teddy's elephant gun, or what I thought was Teddy's elephant gun. The thing that was Hector's head exploded, and the body fell limp a few feet away from us. Atkins and I both turned to Teddy and found the man still fumbling to load his weapon. Both our eyes got big. My gun misfired, he mumbled as he shoved a long bullet into his weapon. Then who fired that shot? I asked. How the hell was that man walking around with no brain? Asked Atkins. Because he wasn't a man. A familiar female voice called out. We all turned to see a dark-headed woman standing there with an elephant gun of her own in her hands. "You really don't know how to stay out of trouble, do you?" she asked as she looked me up and down. "No, he does not," Atkins said. "I take it you're Sonia?" I asked. The woman smirked. She was only a few inches shorter than me. Her dark brown hair was braided, and the tail was draped around one of her shoulders. She also had blue eyes and a face full of freckles. "I am. Now, how did 2 US Marshals get involved in Tippis territory?" she asked. "We've been chasing this one and his brother for a few weeks now," Atkins said. "Were you chasing them before they turned?" Sonia asked. "Turned?" I asked with a puzzled look on my face. "Do you people seriously not know what these men are?" Sonia asked as she slung her rifle onto her back. "Would you mind telling us?" Atkins asked. Sonia rubbed her forehead. "You've got to be kidding me. They're fucking vampires. I'm amazed you idiots are still alive." "Vampires?" asked Teddy. "Shouldn't they burn in the sun?" I asked. The sun was beating down on us hard. It had been for a few hours now. I didn't know about everyone else, but I was sweating like a pig. "No, they don't burn in the sun. I don't know where anyone got that idea from," Sonia said. Atkins and I looked at each other. There was no way vampires existed. It was all just stories parents told to scare their kids. But then again, Raoul had those teeth. He took 6 bullets and didn't slow down. Hector took even more. "Could vampires be the ones killing my men?" asked Teddy. That question sent shivers down my spine. "No, your boss wouldn't kill their own workers," Sonia said calmly. Teddy's eyes got big, and he smiled widely. "My boss ain't no vampire." Sonia raised her eyebrows. Teddy let out a deep laugh. "If they were vampires, why don't they drink blood?" he asked. That was when the flash of Hector coming out of the room in the brothel flew across my mind. Teddy? Hector had a bite wound on his neck when he came out of Moria's sister's room," I said. Now Atkins laughed. "You don't believe this?" he asked. I sighed. "I'm not sure what I believe." "Yeah, we don't even know who you are," Teddy said as he raised his rifle at Sonia. Sonia crossed her arms. "My name is Sonia Helsing. I work for someone who has an interest in protecting people from the things that go bump in the night." "Wait, like Abraham van Helsing? From Dracula?" I asked. Sonia glared at me. "The man who wrote that book heard bits and pieces of the story from my drunk father in a bar. It has no bearing on what happened." It got quiet. All eyes were on Sonia, as was Teddy's gun. "The last time we talked, you said you weren't supposed to be here. Why?" asked Atkins. "The Tippis family has my brother. I was explicitly told not to track him down. I did anyways. You boys should consider yourselves lucky that I did so, or else you'd all be dead." "Your brother?" I asked. "Jackson Helsing. He just goes by Jack." Teddy's eyes just about bulged. "Your brother is that crazy-eyed lunatic that took my job?" Sonia glared at him. "He's one of her familiars. She turned him, and he can't control himself." Teddy raised his weapon from his hip to his shoulder. It was still pointed right at Sonia's chest. "I don't know about you boys, but I'm having a hard time buying all of this. Hiroshi said that the woman who stopped him in the road had dark hair. She's also got an elephant gun, which would have blown my men to pieces." Atkins grumbled. Sonia raised a brow at us. "Whatever's happening to your men has nothing to do with me," Sonia said calmly. "Oh yeah? Then what could it be?" Teddy asked aggressively. "I don't." A loud gunshot rang out. Teddy's head was suddenly turned into red mist. My eyes shot to where the shot came from. At the top of the small cliff stood a man with 2 pistols aimed down at us. I raised my pistol to fire back, but it only clicked. Sonia dove down into the cave system. I took cover behind some brush while Atkins ran for cover behind a nearby rock. My left arm was still in a sling. I put my pistol back into its holster and pulled my second one. I watched as the figure of the man stepped off the cliff and landed in the small clearing right next to Hector's body. I had a clear view of this man, or whatever the hell it was. It wore a battered Confederate uniform. Its eyes seemed to glow a faint red color. The skin on its face seemed to be partially rotten off. I could see bits of skull around the left eye and around its mouth. It turned and started walking into the cave system. My eyes went back to Teddy's elephant gun. It had hit the ground about 2 feet away from where I was hiding. Every instinct I had told me to just fuck it and run. But I couldn't let Sonia die after she had saved my life twice. I looked over at Atkins. I'm not sure how he knew what I was thinking. He mouthed the word no to me, but I didn't listen. I grabbed Teddy's elephant gun and aimed it at the gunslinger. The pain in my shoulder made me grit my teeth, but I had the thing in my sights. I squeezed the trigger. The gun went off and my ears rang like bells. I hit the gunslinger in the back. The bullet passed through his chest cavity, but left more than a large hole in his uniform. The gunslinger stopped and turned around to face me with his pistol raised. "Fuck me," was all I could get out before Atkins tackled me to the ground. "You dumbass! You're gonna get us killed!" he shouted as we both stumbled through the brush. The gunslinger's pursuit was relentless. We narrowly dodged the bullets he sent our way as we hightailed it back toward town. Somewhere between us almost dying and us finding our way back behind the jailhouse, we managed to lose him. Or maybe he let us get away. I'm not sure. But we were greeted by Jack when we arrived. "Hello, boys," he said with his hands in his pockets. "We saw the gunslinger. It got Teddy," Atkins groaned. Jack raised his eyebrows as he looked past us into the brush. "Teddy's gone?" he asked. "Got his head vaporized," I shouted. Jack chuckled like a psycho. "That must have been quite the spectacle. But surely the two of you could take down a single gunslinger." "We shot it with an elephant gun, and it just kept coming," Atkins barked. Jack slumped his shoulders. "It's probably a revenant. You have to take out its brain." "What?" I asked with a confused look on my face. "Oh, come on. I know Sonia probably told you about how we're all vampires. Do you expect me to believe that she didn't say anything about revenants?" Atkins and I looked at each other, then back at Jack. The man still wore the same smile. Jackson just admitted to being a vampire. And now, I had no reason not to believe him. "So what, are you gonna kill us now?" I asked. Jack shrugged. "Moria would like you gentlemen alive. She seems to think you could prove useful, especially with your handling of the Pedro brothers." "Useful for what?" asked Atkins. Jack shrugged again. "Lunch maybe, I don't know. All I know is, if you don't come with me to the whorehouse, I get to turn one of you into a pincushion." Both Atkins and I remembered how difficult it had been to take down Hector with the weapon he had on us, and Hector didn't even have a brain. Jack escorted us to Moria's room. When we got there, Moria was waiting for us in the center of the windowless room. It was illuminated by crude black lamps in each corner of the room. There was a small bed in one corner and a wooden desk in the other. "Hello, boys," Moria greeted between puffs of a cigarette. Jack left us in the room with Moria. "Miss Moria?" Atkins greeted. "It's Madam," Moria corrected. "Don't care," Atkins grumbled. Moria rolled her eyes. "I hear you boys had an encounter with Jack's sister." "Wait, Jack is her brother?" I asked. That explains a lot, Atkins said. You two done playing dumb? I know she already told you that information. I raised a brow. Moria smirked at me. When someone of royal blood turns another into a familiar, they can see through their eyes. It's one of our many abilities. Terry hadn't been human since you guys met him at the mines. Just a well-mannered and well-performed puppet. So it's true, what Sonia said? I asked with a tilted head. Moria shrugged. There's no point in hiding it. What about the people in this town? Do they know? Asked Atkins. Not all. Some suspect, but don't ask questions. Some are already familiars. Moria glided over to me. She was in my face now, and I could see her sharpened teeth behind her scarlet lips. My hand instinctively went for my gun. Oh, relax. I don't bite. Much, she whispered through a smirk. What do you want from us? Pressed Atkins. Well, Lilith's revenant is out there attacking anyone who leaves town, which would include you boys. I'm a bit concerned that she's going to turn up with an army of revenants before my father can arrive. We don't want to get involved in no vampire civil war, Atkins grunted. Moria laughed. Oh my dear, Lilith isn't a vampire. She's the mother of monsters. She could wipe us off the face of the earth in seconds. What's she waiting for? I asked. My guess would be for Vlad to come down here. Regardless, if I'm wrong, then a whole lot of both my people and yours are going to die. So with that being said, I need your help defending the city. And if we say no? I asked. Then I'll turn you, and you won't have the ability to make the decision. I raised a brow. Why not just turn us anyway? Moria shrugged. She's the mother of monsters. She created my kind. She didn't create yours. What's that mean? Demanded Atkins. It means she's the most dangerous being on the planet. Now, go downstairs and have a drink. Think about it. Atkins and I left the room, where Jack winked at us as we left. We got to the bar, and Atkins ordered a shot. We sat in silence for a bit. She's scared, Atkins grumbled. I know, I responded. We shouldn't help them. They're gonna kill us after to keep their secret, Atkins said as he took the shot. I spun around in my seat and looked out into the crowd. There was no telling who Moria had listening to us. The bar was packed again. The piano man was going nuts again. His fingers rattled off a tune that I didn't care about. My eyes did catch sight of a woman sitting at a table by herself. Her gray eyes met mine. Her auburn hair was tied behind her head in a ponytail. She wore a dirty brown leather overcoat over a button-up white t-shirt. She smiled at me when our eyes met again. I scoffed as I turned back to Atkins. She was probably one of Moria's. You're right, but what other choice do we have? I asked as I turned back to look at the woman. Her attention was off me, and now on the gentleman sitting in the chair across from her. An older man in a nice suit. The same one who'd shown up at my door. He looked at me from the corner of his eye and smiled. I blinked to do a double take. But then, he was just gone. We ain't got a choice, but we need to figure out a way out of here, Atkins grumbled. There's no way out, Hiroshi said as he joined us at the bar. He leaned on the bar right next to me. Atkins eyed me as if to signal that we needed to stop talking. Relax, I'm not a familiar, Hiroshi whispered. Yeah, I don't believe you, I whispered back. Hiroshi nodded. That's smart. You may live through this. But no, if you want proof, meet me behind the inn. Hiroshi ordered a shot and left. We sat there in silence for a few minutes. I kept looking at the empty table where the woman had been sitting. It was empty, and I was more confused than I think I've ever been in my life. I felt like I was going crazy. "Have you boys thought it through?" Jack's voice interrupted me from my daze. "Well, we ain't got much of a choice," Atkins grumbled. "You're right, and you don't," Jack sneered. "What are our orders then?" I asked. Jack shrugged. "Don't leave town. When the time comes, I'll come get you. You may go back to your rooms." We went back to the inn to see several of Jack's security already searching behind the building. Atkins coughed. "Stupid drunk," I mumbled to myself as I opened the door to my room, this time a bit more slowly. I stood in the doorway, relieved to find my room empty this time. Ken?" Atkins whispered. I walked to Atkins's doorway, where we both found Hiroshi lying in his bed, looking up at the ceiling with a bottle of whiskey in one hand. Sonia was sitting in a chair in the corner with a repeating rifle trained on us. She motioned for us to come inside the room and shut the door. "Long day?" she asked. Hiroshi sat up. "Fucking horrible day. I can't believe that fucker blew Teddy's head off." "What are y'all doing here?" asked Atkins. "Well, saving your asses for one," Sonia sneered. I grunted as I pulled out my pistol and aimed it at Sonia. She seemed surprised by how fast I pulled it, but she wasn't fazed. "If you were going to shoot me, you'd have done it when you walked in," she growled. Hiroshi only laughed. "I didn't ask for your help. I don't even know you," I said through gritted teeth. "Kid, calm down," Atkins said softly as he lowered my pistol. "Now, I think we may have all gotten off the wrong foot." "How are you still alive?" I demanded. Sonia exhaled. "One of my bosses showed up and saved me." "Bosses?" I asked. "Yes, bosses. Apparently, after they found out Lilith was in the area, they felt the need to interrupt my little crusade and see if we can't figure this whole thing out." "Did you get yelled at?" asked Atkins with a shit-eating smile across his face. Sonia only rolled her eyes. "Good," he grumbled. "Are we done acting like children? Because I'm not sure how much time we have left," a voice said from another corner of the room. I instinctively raised my gun in the direction of the voice, where that suited man awaited me with his hands clasped together. "Hello, Ken. It's nice to see you again," he said. I thought I was hallucinating. I thought my brain had finally broken from the stress and I was having a mental breakdown. "Atkins, you can see him too, right?" "Yup." I cocked the hammer back on my revolver. "Who the hell are you?" I growled. "You'd have trouble believing me if I told you," the man said with a smile. "Try me," Atkins said. The old man rolled his eyes and turned to Sonia. "They are stubborn." Sonia responded with an eyebrow raise. "Well, I have many names. The ones you may address me as is, Willie," he said. "That sounds made up," said Atkins. "As I said before, you'd have trouble believing me," Willie said with a grin. Suddenly, a woman appeared in the room out of nowhere. The same one from the bar. "We're running out of time. Jack is coming to check on our friends." Willie's eyes grew large, and he snapped his fingers. Everyone in the room, aside from Atkins and I, vanished into thin air. "What the hell?" I asked. There was a sudden knock on the door. Atkins answered it, and found Jack standing there with a massive smile on his face. A blonde-headed woman in a blue silk dress stood behind him. "Hello, lads," he greeted us. "What do you want?" asked Atkins. Jack stepped to the side, and the blonde woman stepped forward. "I'm Anna, Moria's sister, and I just wanted to say thank you for taking care of Hector. I know it doesn't mean much, considering he turned out to be a vampire, but he did try to murder me, and may have succeeded had you not come running up the stairs." "Did you not know he was a vampire?" I asked. Anna shrugged. There are lots of vampires around the country. We don't control everyone who gets turned. Some go off on their own. And kill 30 chickens? I asked. Anna giggled. She seemed so timid compared to her sister. Then, I remembered the bite taken out of Hector's neck, and my trust evaporated. Well, if that's it, we should leave, Jack said as he motioned Anna to come with him. Anna smiled at him and then turned back to me. It was nice to meet you finally, she said before walking away. I shut the door and looked at Atkins. We need a lot more whiskey. April 15th, 1899. I woke up this morning to the woman from the bar standing at the foot of my bed. My dreariness went into full-blown attack mode. My eyes bulged as I raised my pistol at her. She smirked as she put her hands up. What the fuck do you want? I demanded. Seriously? She asked with an unamused look on her face. I groaned as I lowered the pistol. I'm sorry, I'm just not used to people appearing out of thin air. She laughed softly. I'm here with a message from Willie. He says, if you guys want to escape from this hellhole, you guys need to help us locate an item. An item? I asked. She pulled an old piece of cloth from her coat pocket and handed it to me. I unrolled it to find a picture of a round necklace with some kind of gem in the center. What is this? I asked. The reason Hiroshi was sent here. We think it's what the Tippis Corporation was looking for. You think this is why Lilith was after those maps? I asked. The woman shrugged. Lilith has a history with the Tippis family. I sat up in my bed and looked at her. She really was a beautiful woman. I thought so when I saw her at the saloon. What's your name? I asked. Megan, she replied. Well, Megan, I don't know how you expect us to get to the mine when we can't leave town. She brushed her hair behind her ear. They need it to take out Lilith, and I highly doubt it's in the mine. I grumbled. I don't understand any of this. I couldn't understand any of this, because it makes no sense. Why do any of these people need me? What have we stumbled upon in the Arizona desert? You guys need to steal it before Vlad gets here. Why don't you do it? I mean, you can disappear and reappear like some kind of witch, I said bluntly. Megan smiled at me. I am a witch. That's exactly why I can't do it. The moment I touch it, Lilith will know where it is. How is that possible? What is she? I asked. She's the first demon, also one of the first beings in the universe to learn the art of both blood and black magic. And that's what powers the medallion, she said, pointing at the picture that sat next to me. Why can't you touch it? I asked. She put a black magic spell on it that sends a signal every time someone who isn't human touches it. That was when it hit me. The whole reason Moria needed Atkins and me. The reason Willie wanted us to do this. We were only human. What does this thing do? I asked. Megan smirked. Its main function is that of a key to a multitude of doorways to other worlds. It was buried out here in the early days of civilization by Cain. Other worlds? What do you mean? Like Martians? In a way, she replied. Jesus, this just keeps getting weirder. I groaned. Megan smiled again. Lilith can't get that key. Neither can Vlad. They'll both use it to conquer this planet. I sighed. So if Moria finds it, she's probably going to make one of us carry it around to keep Lilith from getting a hold of its location. But Lilith already stole all of Hiroshi's maps. Why wouldn't she already have figured out where it is? Cain hid it from her after she used it to travel to Jotunheimen and put a curse on the giants who lived there. He made sure she'd never be able to get anywhere near it with a blood magic barrier around its location. She needs someone to take it out first. I'm confused. So if this Cain put a spell on it to keep her from getting to it, how'd she put her own spell on it to send a signal? This doesn't make sense. Megan rolled her eyes and scoffed. Did you not hear me say she used it in the past? She placed that spell there when she first took a hold of it. How'd this Kane guy steal it from her? Who is this Kane guy to begin with? Megan smirked softly. He was her second in command on Earth. I guess he got tired of all the killing. The world's first killer grew tired of killing. That Kane, I said. Megan only nodded. Do you have any more questions? Yeah, say I believe any of what's going on. Why come to me and not Atkins? I asked. Willie seems to like you, and I trust his judgment. How can I trust Willie? I asked. Megan sighed. Trust your gut. I sat there for a few seconds, unsure of what to think about the situation. Megan didn't let me get another word in before she vanished. The pieces of information she'd given me started to make some semblance of sense, but they also made me want to take the Bible out of my satchel and start reading. About an hour later, I was sitting in front of Atkins, trying to explain what was happening. The man took it as well as he could. He'd never really believed in the supernatural in his life, so this whole experience had been a bit of a reality check. We eventually agreed that we needed to get out, and our best chance to do that would be to get a hold of this necklace. We figured that if they needed us to carry it, then just about everyone in town was at the very least a familiar. But that did make me wonder about Hiroshi. If he wasn't a familiar, wouldn't Moria have figured that out by now? Or maybe everyone had been turned into a familiar recently? It was just another question I had about who I could trust. The list seemed to be getting smaller by the minute. Our conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Jack, telling us that we were on guard duty outside of the saloon. Atkins and I posted up at the front steps and just sat there all day in the blistering heat, watching people come in and out. It wasn't until about 6 in the evening that Moria called me into her quarters. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but her mid-coitus with Jack wasn't it. I just about walked in and walked straight back out when she stopped me. My father will be here within 12 hours. Before he gets here, I need you and your friend to go, and... She stopped talking for a second and looked down at Jack. I didn't tell you to stop. Then looked back at me. Go down to the mine and retrieve an item, then bring it to me. Anna and several of our men will escort you. My heart danced a little from hearing this. Remember, no one can touch the item besides you. Got it? I exhaled. What is this item? I asked. It's a piece of jewelry. It belongs to my father. Now, run along. I'm kind of in the middle of something. I shuddered as I walked out, where Anna met me in the hallway with a smile on her face. I guess I'll be joining you, I greeted. Anna looked past me into Moria's room and rolled her eyes. I'm sorry you had to see that, she said. I chuckled. Believe me, I've seen way worse. Now, when are we leaving? I asked. I must admit that my mind was at the point where I just wanted to get this over with and get out of here. Anna smiled politely. As soon as you two are ready. I've got our security escort all ready. 12 of our black guards. Black guards? I asked. They're like a royal bodyguard. Father sent them to announce his arrival. Now we're borrowing them. Would they stand a chance against something like the Revenant? I asked. Anna shrugged. They might. They haven't fought Revenants in over 400 years. Anna and I eventually exited the saloon, where I found Atkins, staring at these horsemen that just rode up. They wore all black clothing, including black bandanas that covered their faces. They all had newer model repeating rifles, as well as medieval-looking swords. Well, we're going to get a necklace, I said as I nudged Atkins. Atkins turned to me with a confused brow raised, then looked over my shoulder at the approaching Anna. What necklace? He asked, trying to play it as dumb as possible. Who are these guys? He asked, after he got no response. They are called the Black Guard. Course they are. We rode straight to the mine with the Black Guardsmen. I'd half expected Anna to ride in a wagon behind us, but she proved to be surprisingly skilled on horseback. We got to the mine after the full moon had risen high in the sky. We could hear wolves howling in the distance. My mind reminisced of the story that Teddy had told. Then I found myself wondering if that had even really been Teddy that we'd been talking to. We reached the mouth of the mineshaft that the necklace was said to be in. The black guardsmen created a defensive perimeter in front of it, just in case of an attack while we were inside. Anna handed Atkins and me torches. We lit them, and we were on our way into the darkness. The place looked as if it was originally a cave system at first, but then was turned into a mine later on. The mine was wide enough that both Atkins and I could walk next to each other, but not by much. As we walked, we had two of the black guardsmen babysitting us. Guess we weren't trusted. "How much silver do you think they mined from in here?" asked Atkins. "Enough to pay off several governors," I said in response. We made it a good distance down the tunnel when we came to an opening that revealed an altar-like area. The necklace is even more beautiful in person. It's gold with a red ruby in the center. The gold around the ruby is engraved with symbols I don't recognize. I'm not a treasure hunter. Atkins and I walked into the room. I noticed that our chaperone stopped at the doorway. It wasn't very large, maybe about the size of the saloon in spring. Atkins walked straight up to the necklace and grabbed it. But the moment he did, he froze up. "Roy?" I asked. I walked around to get a look at his face. He had tears in his eyes, and his hands trembled. "Roy?" I yelled a bit louder. He didn't acknowledge me. I reached out and snatched the medallion from his hand. He took a step back. His eyes widened as he noticed me. I saw something," he mumbled. I put the medallion in the leather satchel that I keep my journal in. Atkins stood, looking around in disbelief for a second. Tears were running down his scared face. "Ken, I saw them again. The soldier who..." He touched the scar under his eye. "I couldn't save them," he said. I sighed. I'd never heard the story about how he'd gotten his scars. I'd wanted to ask, but hadn't out of respect for the man's privacy. I knew it wasn't something he wanted to talk about. "Come on, Roy. Let's get out of here," I said calmly as I started for the door. At the doorway, I found Megan and Sonia had killed both the black guardsmen. "Hi," Megan waved as we walked out into the mine. Hi?" I was a bit confused by their arrival. "Are you guys ready to go?" Sonia asked. Atkins nodded as he wiped his face. "Was he crying?" asked Sonia. "No," Atkins grumbled. Megan snapped her fingers. The next thing I knew, we were standing next to a cliff. Willie and Hiroshi waited for us with our horses. My stomach churned from the sudden motion, and I felt like heaving up my dinner. But I didn't. "What was that?" I asked. "Teleportation," Willie said. "Where are we?" Atkins asked. "A few miles from Spring. If this is going to work, we need Vlad and Lilith in the same space," said Megan. I pulled the medallion from the satchel and went to hand it to Sonia. Sonia's eyes grew large, and she looked at Willie. "What are you doing?" Willie asked. "You said this thing needs to be in the hands of someone who doesn't practice magic. Now, if I'm correct, Hiroshi is some kind of vampire, Megan's a witch, and I have no fucking clue what you are. If you want the medallion, Sonia seems like the best person to give it to." Willie laughed. "The medallion has an adverse effect on regular humans who have a tremendous amount of guilt. It makes you see things. You didn't figure that out when Atkins touched it and froze?" I sighed as I put the medallion back in my bag. I now knew why they needed me to do this. "Why do we not just destroy it?" I asked. "We still need it to send Vlad and Lilith to Purgatory," Megan said. "And Lilith won't come after it until Vlad makes it to spring. Sonia added. So we have to go back to spring? Atkins asked. Willie nodded. Once everyone makes it, you can hand the medallion to Megan, and then you're free to go. Vlad will be here in 12 hours, I said. Then, you've only got 12 hours left until you're free, said Hiroshi. We've got about 4 hours left. We've been camping on the outskirts of spring, trying to come up with a plan. I'm going to be honest, I'm not very optimistic about our chances. I'm not planning on sticking around long enough to get caught up in a war zone. July 7th, 1899. It's been a few months, but I can finally write again. The last time I wrote in this journal, I was anticipating some kind of apocalyptic battle. Now I'm sitting on the 4th floor of a hotel in Colorado Springs, trying to sort my head through the things that have happened since then. I can still feel where the bullets went into my chest. So, Vlad entered the town with a giant caravan as the sun came up. Several wagons, and probably around 100 black guardsmen. He'd even had a couple of Gatling guns mounted on some of the wagons. We watched through binoculars from a nearby ridge, probably around a mile away. Vlad rode in the front of the caravan with his son, Darius, and grandson, Van, close behind him. Vlad was way younger than I'd imagined. I thought he would have been in his 50s or 60s. The man looks no older than 40. He wears the same black garbs as his guardsmen. He's got a short black beard and slicked back hair to match. We couldn't tell much about his conversation with Anna and Moria from a distance, but I could tell that he wasn't happy. I'm pretty sure he slapped Moria. He gave an order, and his guardsmen spread out around the city. He's here, Willie said. Now what? I asked. We get Lilith's attention. Megan grimaced. Willie snapped his fingers, and we found ourselves back in my room at the inn. I pulled the medallion from my pack and held it up towards Megan. I give you this, and we can leave? I asked. She hesitated for a second, and nodded. I handed it to her. Then, she suddenly froze. It looked like she was straining hard. For a split second, I thought she was going to burst into tears. Megan, you're stronger than that memory. Come on now, Willie said through gritted teeth. Megan took a deep breath and snapped out of it. She groaned. That spell is way stronger than we thought, she said. Megan, old friend, are you in there? A voice called out from outside. Megan's eyes grew large as she turned and looked at me. Atkins made for the window and took a look outside. Vlad's outside, with 2 Gatling guns aimed at our window. How? Willie asked. Did you really think I couldn't anticipate you? Vlad's voice boomed. You haven't changed since the 1400s. Now, you guys can come outside if you wish. If not, I'll just mow down this hotel. Megan laughed. Well, that was unexpected. What the hell are we supposed to do? Atkins asked. Megan sighed, then snapped her fingers. She vanished, then reappeared outside. I made my way to the window to watch. Atkins hadn't lied about Vlad. He really did have almost every gun in town aimed at us. My heart sank. We're gonna die, I said. Calm down, Atkins grumbled. All eyes were on Megan. How'd you know I'd come to this particular room? Megan asked. Vlad smiled as he shrugged. Well, I figured that you'd know which humans we would recruit to get the medallion for us. How is that? She asked. I turned the Pedro brothers, Vlad said with his hands spread out wide. You think it was a coincidence that those marshals tracked them here? We needed humans. Good ones. I could see Moria's jaw open slightly as she turned to her father. Megan nodded. I'm almost impressed, but what's your plan for Lilith? Vlad smiled again. Give me the medallion, and I'll tell you. Megan scoffed. We don't have to be enemies, Vlad said. I know what you plan to use this for, Megan hissed. Vlad laughed. Okay, maybe we do. But we both want Lilithcon. You may be the only being on this planet that she's hurt more than me. We can make a deal. Megan turned back to the window and sighed. Maybe there was a time when I would have believed you. The old you. But not this monster you've become. Vlad shrugged. Shame. Open fire. Vlad was interrupted by the loudest, mind-piercing screech I've ever heard. I clasped my hands over my ears and fell to my knees. The screech went on for what seemed like forever. Then it stopped. When it did, I started to get up, but a hand fell on my shoulder. Don't move, Megan whispered. What was that? I whispered back. The mother of monsters. My eyes widened as I peeked over the windowsill. I could see Vlad getting to his feet. He turned to his black guardsmen. They were all looking down the road directly ahead of us, where a lone figure walked in their direction. Vlad turned to his son Darius. Shit, get your sisters out of here. Darius didn't argue. He nodded and motioned for Moria and Anna to leave with him. Vlad turned and looked at the window, almost right at me, and growled under his breath. I looked past him at the figure marching our way. The guardsman on the Gatling gun spun towards the direction of the figure. Fire! Vlad commanded. There was a loud crack. The vampire on the Gatling guns to the right was blown in half, showering the wagon in crimson rain. The one on the left opened fire, but it only got a few shots off before its head was turned into red mist. Atkins and I looked at each other. We both knew what the figure was. The revenant was in town. Get us out of here, Atkins growled as he turned to Megan. Megan raised her fingers and snapped. But nothing happened. Her eyes widened as she looked over at Willie, who tried the same thing and got the same result. We could hear the gunfire erupting from outside as the black guardsman opened up on the revenant. There was a war raging outside. We need to get out of this building, Atkins growled as he stood up and started heading for the back of the room. Vlad pulled a curved, medieval-looking blade from his hip. The blade erupted in flames as soon as it was free from its scabbard. I kept watching outside as the revenant gunned down several more vampires. Go get the fucking humans, he snarled at one of his men. The door to our room suddenly flew open, and a black guardsman stood at the door with a revolver. But as soon as he stepped inside, Megan raised one of her hands, and the vampire flew straight through the ceiling. My eyes widened as I turned to Megan, who just shrugged. We can't stay here, Sonia shouted from her corner. I pulled a revolver with my good arm and looked to the back of the room. Atkins was feeling the wall. I think it should be thin enough to break through here, he shouted as he took a step back, then rammed his shoulder into it. The wall buckled a little bit. Move, Hiroshi ordered as he cut to his feet. He charged the wall so fast that my eyes couldn't keep up with him. He went through the wall like a bullet, tumbling through to the sand outside. We all funneled through the hole, only to find 4 more black guardsmen with weapons aimed at us. I raised my pistol back at them. Sonia and Atkins raised their rifles. We all loaded our guns with silver ammunition, as per Willie's instructions. Our weapons were lethal to these things, but this wasn't a gunfight we wanted to be in, especially since one of them held Hiroshi by his throat with their pistol aimed at the top of his head. Lower your weapons, the lead man demanded. Suddenly, all 4 of their guns were ripped from their hands and slung out into the dirt. I opened fire, shooting the one holding Hiroshi in the forehead. Atkins and Sonia made quick work of the other 3. Oh, it feels good to be able to kill these things, I mumbled to myself as I turned to Megan. Thanks for getting rid of their guns. Megan smiled and nodded as she put the necklace on. You boys get out of here. We gotta... She was cut off by a loud gunshot. Crimson splattered on both her and me. I turned to identify the source of the noise, to find the revenant standing in the hole right next to a woman I'd never seen before. A dark-haired woman with black marks that resembled war paint slowly emerging around her eyes. She gave me a wicked smile as I raised my pistol at her and fired. This was ineffective. Megan somehow conjured up a fireball and managed to knock the revenant back through the hole he came in. I ran out of bullets and switched to my other gun. It was then that I realized that Willie had disappeared. Sonia raised her weapon at the woman, but an invisible force seemed to toss her about 20 yards. She went tumbling through the sand. The same thing happened to Hiroshi, leaving just Megan, Atkins and I standing there. "Atkins, we need to move," I shouted as I turned. Atkins had gotten his whole arm blown off at the shoulder. My eyes widened as my friend fell to the ground, his face full of shock, while his blood soaked the sand, like he couldn't comprehend what was happening. "Lilith," I heard Megan bark. I turned back to the woman and raised my other pistol. "You have something that belongs to me," Lilith spouted back. Megan raised her hands out in front of her, and 2 fireballs conjured up out of thin air above them. Lilith only laughed. "Hellfire? Do I look like a fucking vampire to you?" An oily black tendril shot out of Lilith's back just as Megan hurled the fireballs. It managed to hit Megan in the shoulder, while the fireballs hit Lilith in the face and abdomen. Megan fell backward to the ground, while Lilith shrugged off the fireballs. "Stupid girl. You never could live up to Merlin's reputation," Lilith said as her gaze turned to me. Her face seemed to morph into one filled with psychotic joy. "And what are you, a normal human?" I unloaded my pistol into her, but she just shrugged off the silver bullets like they were pebbles. "How cute," she laughed as a tendril shot out of her back and into my knee. I howled as the sharp, searing pain caused my leg to buckle. I dropped my pistol and fell to the dirt. My eyes shot over to Megan, who was holding her shoulder, then Atkins, who had passed out from blood loss. Then they went back to Lilith, who calmly walked towards me. Her eyes were inky black, and her facial expression seemed hungry. I felt like a piece of meat. Poor little human, getting himself involved in things that shouldn't exist, Lilith mocked. "What do you want?" I growled. "Ooh, feisty," Lilith laughed as she turned and walked toward Megan. As she did so, I noticed a figure emerge on the inn's roof. A dark-headed man wielding a burning sword with blood-red colored flames. My eyes shot back to Lilith, who was completely unaware of what was about to happen. Vlad leaped off the roof with his sword raised high as he tried to lop off Lilith's head. However, the woman ducked. The blade singed some of her raven black hair. A tendril shot out of her back and went straight into Vlad's shoulder. Then another went into Vlad's knee. "There you are," Lilith laughed. Vlad groaned in pain. Lilith's psychotic smile only widened. She was enjoying the pain she was inflicting. She had Vlad suspended around 10 feet in the air. "I'll fucking kill you," Vlad sneered. Lilith scoffed. "I don't understand all this hatred, Vlad. Where would you be without me? Rotting away in a Gehennian torture chamber?" "Fuck you," Vlad grimaced as the tendrils twisted. "I'm disappointed in you, Vlad. We could have had something special on this planet. But you threw it away. And for what? Your sons? Daughters? They'll be mine, Vlad. Your entire species is mine." It was then that I noticed Megan getting both of her hands around the medallion. The ruby had started to glow red. Then I noticed something else. I could hear galloping. My eyes widened as I turned my head. Darius was charging towards us with Van and Jack in tow. Darius was almost a spitting image of his father, red flaming sword and all. Van, however, was just a pale imitation. He had a pistol out and aimed. I followed his gaze, and my heart jumped when I noticed that it wasn't aimed at Lilith. I staggered to my feet using the strength I had left. and I jumped in front of Megan before Van could get a shot off. I felt the sting in my chest as my mind raced. I didn't know why I did it. The next few minutes were a blur. All I remember are incoherent images. The revenant must have broken free because I remember him shooting at Vlad and then us. Then there was some kind of fiery tornado that surrounded us. Then all I remember is blackness and my dad's voice. You did good, but you ain't done yet. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a bed in this hotel room, and 2 weeks had passed. The first thing I noticed when I woke up was that my ears and throat hurt like hell. That and I could actually hear the rats crawling in the walls of the room. The room I was in was small. It was just a twin-size bed and 4 walls. The blankets were heavy and soft buffalo hide. I touched my chest. The wound was right where my heart would have been. Only now, it was made entirely from scar tissue. I grimaced as I sat up. I expected my body to ache, but to my surprise, it didn't. Hell, even my shoulder and knee felt normal now. I stood up from beside the bed, wondering just what kind of dream I must have been having. That was when I realized that I was buck-ass naked. I sat back down and got back under the blanket. You're finally awake, Willie said as he walked into the room. A flash of rage went flying through my mind. I would have gotten up and knocked the shit out of him, but I don't fight naked. Where did you go? I barked. Well, I had to figure out what was disabling our teleportation spells. It turns out it was a nifty black magic spell that Vlad conjured up using some old Nordic runes. Broke the moment Lilith had him suspended. Did we at least take care of them? I asked in an annoyed voice. No, Megan was so focused on protecting you after you had gotten yourself killed protecting her that she didn't have time to do the spell. So, thank you. You made us lose. What do you mean killed? I asked. Willie just pointed to the scar tissue on my chest. You don't get shot through the heart and live, kid. I ground my teeth together when he told me this. I didn't like this at all. If I had died, then why was I sitting there? How am I? Alive? Asked Willie. Yeah? Willie exhaled. Because I gave you a serum? A serum? I asked. It's like a potion. It healed your wounds, made you a little stronger, and also brought you back from the dead. I gave him a confused glance. What? I asked. Willie rolled his eyes. Ken, you're special. You always have been. That's why I picked you. You picked me? That was when I suddenly remembered. Wait, where's Atkins? Willie glanced away from me. He's alive, but we're doing the best we can. Megan said from the doorway. Well, you can't give him the same shit you gave me? I asked. Willie took a deep breath. No. Why the hell not? Well, for one, the Omega Serum only works on the dead, and I only have enough for one person. I just about shot out of bed, but I remembered that I was completely nude again. Is he going to live? I asked as I slumped back down. He should, so long as I can keep the infection at bay, Megan said. It would be easier to heal had he not been hit by one of the Revenant's bullets. Willie followed. It's just a bullet, I said. Lilith did something to his guns. Atkins has some kind of black magic-based poison running through his veins. Megan and I have been doing our best to fight it off, but it keeps coming back, Willie said with a grim tone. I slumped further down in the bed. I didn't know whether to sob or scream. I'll get your clothes, and you can go see him, Megan said softly. I didn't respond. I just stared at the blanket covering me. We'd been used constantly ever since we started chasing the Pedro brothers. And now, It had cost me my life, and possibly Atkins's as well. About 15 minutes later, Megan had escorted me across the hall to Atkins's bed. The now one-armed and one-eyed man lay sleeping with a wet rag over his forehead. His bandages still seeped with pus and blood. I exhaled when I saw him, as a lump filled the back of my throat. "I'll be in the hall if you need anything," Megan said softly before walking out. I watched my friend for a few moments. "If you die, I'ma whoop your ass," I promised before I turned and left the room. As I entered the hallway, I found Willie waiting for me with Megan. "Where's the nearest saloon?" I asked, fully intending to drown my stress in whiskey. "You're not leaving," Willie said bluntly. "What?" I asked. "Ken, you've been through a lot. You've just gotten the Omega Serum and don't know your own strength yet. We can't have you getting drunk and punching a hole through someone's chest. Megan just bought this hotel. We don't want to be run out of town," Willie said. I rolled my eyes and marched back to my room. That's where I spent the rest of the day, until I eventually fell asleep again. The next morning, I woke up to a knock at my doorway. Willie stood with his hands in his pockets. "What do you want?" I asked. "I figured I'd give you an update on our situation," Willie said. "Why would I care about our situation? All everyone's done is use us," I responded with an annoyed tone. I didn't care. I didn't want to care. We had gotten played by everyone, and I didn't even trust the people who had brought me back from the dead. Willie leaned on the doorframe and raised his eyebrows. "Why did you become a marshal?" he asked. "Because I'm good with a gun," I responded. "Ken, don't lie to me." I rolled my eyes. My daddy was a Texas Ranger. He was the protector of the family. I figured if I was going to carry on that mantle, I'd need to choose a profession that benefited that. "And how'd that turn out?" he asked. "Well, Mama died right after I got the job. My brother died a few months later in a boat accident. Then my daddy died a few weeks ago. So now, I ain't got a family left to protect. Closest thing I had left is dying in the next room." "Is there a reason you're asking me questions?" "I'm just trying to get inside your head. You seem to have no problem taking a bullet to protect Megan." "It seemed like the right thing to do," I said. "Why?" "I don't know. I don't like seeing people die." "But you've killed people before?" he asked. "Only to protect the innocent ones," I said as I straightened up in the bed. Well, a lot of innocent ones are going to die if we don't do our jobs," he said before he walked away. A few hours later, I found myself next to Atkins's bedside. I sat in a wobbly wooden chair as I read from my Bible. I hadn't even thought of writing anything in my journal. I can remember staring at the words, but nothing was really coming through. It felt hollow inside. "What you reading, kid?" Atkins grumbled weakly. I shut the book and looked up at him. His good eye was looking over at me. "Holy shit, you're alive," I said. "Gonna take a lot more than a fucking missing arm to kill me," he said as he shifted in his bed. I gave off a soft laugh. I thought that seeing him awake would make me feel better. But it didn't. "You look a lot more alive than you did the last time I saw you," he said. I took a deep breath. "Apparently, I am a lot more alive." Atkins shot me a confused look, but I just shrugged it off. "You know they used us, right?" I asked. Atkins smirked. "Yeah, it kind of comes with what we do. Or what you do. I'm retiring right fucking now." I let off another soft laugh. Atkins sighed. "Everyone uses people like us. Our governments use us to keep the peace. Our civilians use us to keep them safe. Everyone uses us for something. But we choose that. We choose to do the job. Moria, Flat, this Willy thing, none of them gave us a choice." We chose to stay and help find that silver, even after we dealt with the Pedro brothers, Atkins pointed out. Did we? They were vampires the whole time. Atkins chuckled as he thought for a moment. That explains why they ate those chickens. It's just, I don't know, man. I don't like being caught up in someone else's fight. Atkins smiled at me. You know how I got this scar? The war? I asked. Atkins nodded and sat up a little bit. I was younger than you when the Yankees recruited me. A few months after that, I fought in my first battle. It wasn't anything major, just a skirmish in a small town in West Virginia. Me and a handful of soldiers raided what we thought was a small rebel outpost. But we were wrong. We were very wrong. Atkins took a second to gather his thoughts. We ran into the town in the dead of night with the orders to burn it down, which we did. No one knew we'd even put the torches down until the buildings were burning. As it burned in front of us, we figured out that it wasn't actually a Confederate-held town or even the town we were supposed to be going after. It turns out our fearless captain had read the map wrong. Atkins took a breath. We started hearing the screamings coming from one of the burning buildings. Now, we'd all been shocked when the captain told us that he thought we'd made a mistake. No one could really move besides myself. I instinctively ran like hell into the nearest building to try and save someone, anyone I could. But the captain caught up to me, saying that we can't let there be any survivors. Witnesses would get us all executed. That son of a bitch. I knocked his 2 front teeth out and started to turn and run when he got me in the face with his musket bayonet. He would have killed me too, had the actual Confederates not shown up and blown his brains out. He took another long and deep breath. It was only after I regained my senses that I realized that the screaming had stopped and we were being shot at. I was next in charge, so I had to take command. I pulled my troops out. Then the war went on. I could see tears starting to build in his eye. I can still hear their screams. I saw them burning in my dreams for 10 years. I never truly forgave myself, but I did kind of start working past it. Then, the other day, when I touched that necklace, I was suddenly standing outside of that house again, my eye drenching my face in blood. I know I could have saved them. All those innocent people died because someone made a mistake in someone else's war. I took a deep breath and leaned back in my wobbly chair. It's a shit world we live in, I said. It's the only one we got. Now we gotta fight for it. When I went back to my room, I found a black revolver waiting for me on my pillow. It looked like a peacemaker, but it seemed a bit different. The handle was a shiny black, almost like marble. The barrel and cylinder looked like they were made of iron. The barrel was thick, but when I picked it up, the weapon was lighter than any I'd ever held. You like it? A voice asked from behind me. I turned to see Willie standing in the doorway. It feels lighter than any other peacemaker I've ever held. That's because it was made from the metals in Heaven's armory. It's a special weapon that I had made just for you. For me? I asked. Yes, it should be able to kill a vampire or almost anything short of an archdemon with a single shot. It also will never run out of ammunition, kind of like mine, he said as he pulled a silver revolver from his jacket. Why are you giving this to me? I asked. Willie smiled. I'm the Horseman of War. You are my chosen. I couldn't help but let off a small laugh. Chosen? I asked with a raised brow. Willie shrugged. And did you just say you were a horseman? Like, of the apocalypse? He sighed. It's a bit more complicated than that. But yes, one of those. I'd say I was surprised. But that would have been a lie. Aren't you guys supposed to end the world? Why are you trying to save it? Willie laughed again. The apocalypse is a complicated thing. Death seems to think that it's supposed to have a set time and date, but none of us really know. Personally, I'd rather it never happen. Until the day it does, our job is to ensure it doesn't. You understand? So, is Willie your real name? I asked. It's what I go by. I haven't remembered my human name since I died fighting the Persians, he said. I raised a brow. What? I asked. He took a deep breath. It's a long story. A shortened version is that I was a soldier in the Spartan army who was the chosen of the original war. He wanted to retire, so he gave me his powers. So I'm alive because you want to retire? I asked. No, you're alive because you've proven yourself useful. You're not the first chosen I've had. What happened to the others? They died horrible deaths. I took another breath. That's not a good sign. Willie shrugged. It comes with what we do. Now, you may have noticed some enhanced senses. It's something we're going to have to work on while you get used to your new body. Hopefully, Lilith and Vlad tore each other apart just enough to give us some time. That's pretty much it for now. We've been spending a lot of time training. The new gun is powerful. It kicks like a mule, but it's nothing I can't handle. I got to test it on watermelon this morning. We put the watermelon behind a 2-inch thick slab of iron. The pistol put a hole in the iron and reduced the watermelon to pink and green mist. Atkins is also up and moving around a bit. When he saw the gun in action, he laughed. I'd clap if I had 2 hands, he said. I've also been spending a lot of time with Megan. She's been nice to me so far. She seems a bit more cheerful than her colleagues. Definitely more than Sonia. Sonia and I are going on a trip to recruit someone tomorrow. So are Atkins and Megan. Apparently, there's been a string of killings a few miles south of here, where the victims have been shot to pieces. July 8th, 1899. Sonia and I were teleported to a campsite somewhere in the Rockies. It was quiet and the ground was slick, like it had just rained. I could feel the mud squelch under my boots with every step. I didn't know much about the man we were looking for, only that he traveled alone and knew Sonia and Willie from a run-in with something called a Wendigo. I guess they've been working on and off together since. The campsite wasn't much, just a smoking pile of burnt sticks and a single tent crafted from various furs and whatnot. Remember, Ken, let me do the talking, Sonia said as we walked by the fire. I only nodded back at her as I looked around at the greenery surrounding me. We were in the middle of the mountains, in the middle of the forest. I wasn't sure we had the right camp. That was until I smelled the wet dog. I could hear the breathing and rustling of leaves from all around us. Then came a low growl. I pulled my gun instinctively and aimed it in the direction of the growl. "What are you doing?" Sonia asked. A big black wolf stepped from the brush. Its upper lip was up as it exposed its pointed teeth at us with a snarl. "Ken, lower your gun," Sonia said calmly. "Why?" I asked. "Duke doesn't like guns," a male voice said from behind me. I turned around to see a bearded, half-native man flanked on either side by massive grey and white wolves. "Wyatt?" Sonia greeted. "Sonia?" Wyatt greeted. "Wait, Wyatt as in Wyatt Walker? The man who walks with wolves?" I asked. He looked older than I was expecting. He had long black hair and a short black beard. He wore no shirt or shoes, just a pair of dirty pants with a tomahawk and a knife attached to the belt. Wyatt nodded. "Who is he?" he asked. "This is Ken Sullivan, U.S. Marshal. Also, Willie's chosen." "No shit?" asked Wyatt with a smirk. He looked at me. "He tell you that you were gonna die a horrible death?" I pressed my lips together and nodded. He smiled and turned back to Sonia. "And why is it that you two are in my camp?" "Remember when we killed that Nosferatu? The one who unleashed it on your village is coming our way. I figured you want to help us kill her. Wyatt laughed. Lilith is back. You'll need more than just me and an Omega soldier. We've got Megan and Hiroshi in town as well. Wyatt turned his head to the side. Megan may stand a chance. The rest of you are going to die. I scoffed. Wyatt snapped his head toward me. You disagree? Not entirely, but we've already survived an encounter with both her and Vlad at the same time. Wait, Vlad's in town too? You guys are selling this really well. Sonia shot me a dirty look from across the fire pit. We have Kane's medallion. I watched as Wyatt's annoyed face changed into one of intrigue. How'd you manage to pull that off? He asked. Sonia gestured towards me. Oh, he grumbled. Do you want to help us or not? Sonia asked. Wyatt thought for a minute. Yeah, what the hell, better than sitting around here anyway. Sonia rolled her eyes and looked at me. Willie? She called out. There was a snap, and we were back inside the hotel. Willie was sitting in a red leather chair, reading a newspaper. The headline said something about Tippis Mining Company being clueless about several of their towns being massacred. Where's Atkins? I asked. They're trying their hand at recruiting us some extra muscle, Hiroshi said as he poured himself a glass of whiskey. He looked over at me. You want some? He asked. I shrugged and walked over. Hiroshi handed me a glass, and we sat at the hotel's bar. So, what's it like being a chosen? Hiroshi asked. I can hear everything that goes on in the hotel at night. Yeah, me too, Hiroshi said with a small laugh. What's it like being a vampire? I asked. It sucks. I fucking hate the taste of blood. I smiled and turned to him. Seriously though, how'd you keep being you after you got turned? Hiroshi took a deep breath. Megan found me half dead in the street. I had just got bitten in a brothel in California and was in the process of turning. She did something to me. I'm not sure what, but it kept me from turning into anyone's bitch. I took a drink from the glass. The whiskey was strong as hell. Well, I'm glad you're on our side, I said. I'm sure, he chuckled. Hey, you fooled the entire town of Spring. You could have stolen their silver as well. Hiroshi laughed. I'm a vampire. What use do I have for silver? Yeah, here's a better question. If silver is a vampire's weakness, why is Vlad mining so much of it? I asked. I'd imagine he wants to get it before someone else does. Yes, but why? Why not make sure no one finds it? All he's doing by mining it is putting it into circulation. Seems kinda stupid to me. Hiroshi shrugged. That's a question for Vlad. He did manipulate events for you guys to show up here. That's another thing. Why us? Why not abduct some people from a nearby town or something? You heard Vlad. He needed good humans. I'm guessing he knew we'd try to recruit you. The hotel was 4 to 5 floors tall, and we sat on the first, which was a bar, a lobby, and the door to the stairwell. I turned and looked out into the lobby from the bar. That was when I noticed that no one had come and stayed at the hotel since I'd been there. Place seems kinda empty, I said. Megan isn't allowing guests, telling everyone that it's under maintenance or something. My eyes moved over to Sonia, who was speaking with Wyatt and Willie in the corner of the room. I honestly wonder what's going to happen at the end of this. The thought bounced through my mind. Was I going to die a horrible death? There was a sudden noise. Megan arrived with Atkins in the center of the room. Willie stood and smiled at her. What did Colonel Grayson say? He asked. That we're stupid, Megan said. Oh, asked Willie. Yeah, she lost him when she started talking about an undead gunslinger, Atkins added. So he's a no? Asked Sonia. No, he said yes. He just called us idiots. Why'd he say yes? I asked. Because he may be the one man in the world that hates Vlad Tippis more than Van Helsing did, Willie said. July 12th, 1899. There's another fight coming. I don't know where or when, but it's coming. I found out yesterday that the hotel we're staying at sits on the edge of the city. I'm honestly a little worried about us being attacked by Lilith or Vlad. I know they both want the necklace. I spent last night on a roof. It was a surprisingly clear night. The sky out here is beautiful at night. There are stars everywhere, and the moon is growing ever closer to being full. I poured myself a glass of whiskey as I tried to enjoy the evening. I guess I just wanted to clear my head. That was when Megan came onto the roof with me. "Why are you out here all alone?" she asked. "I don't know. Not much has happened since we went recruiting." Megan exhaled. "That's how the job goes sometimes. It's either life-changing or boring. There's no in-between." "And you guys wonder why I have a hard time trusting you?" "Well, you did take a bullet for me," Megan said with a smile. "Yes, and before you ask why, I don't know why I did it. I just did." Megan smiled softly. "I know exactly why. You're a good man." I chuckled. Maybe I'm just fucking stupid." Megan got a good laugh out of that one, which in turn gave me a good laugh as well. She looked at me, and her eyes seemed to sparkle in the starlight. My heart danced a little inside my chest. "You have any more of that?" she asked, looking down at my whiskey glass as she sat down next to me. I pulled the bottle from next to my feet and showed it to her. "I'm not sure how much it'll take to get me drunk anymore, but I fully intend to find out," I said as I put it between her and me. I woke up naked and in a room that was not mine around noon. My eyes grew large as my head throbbed. I rolled over to see the bed next to me was empty. My eyes scanned the empty room. It looked very similar to mine, just a bit bigger. That was when I found Megan putting her clothes back on. She must have seen the dumbfounded look on my face. She smiled softly. "So, we found out how much whiskey it takes to get you drunk." I raised a brow. "How much?" I asked. Megan smiled. "I'll tell you tonight," she said before leaving the room. I dropped back down into the bed. What the fuck have I just gotten myself into? July 20th, 1899. So, Megan and I have been sleeping together for a week straight now. I don't know how it keeps happening, or why. I'm not complaining. We don't have much else to do, and I've learned a lot about her over pillow talk. She was born in England around 485 AD and was a student of a magic man that called himself Merlin. I don't know much about King Arthur, but I know that apparently the stories got it wrong. Merlin died fighting Lilith. According to Megan, there's a whole story behind that, which she was present for. She also revealed that she works for a group high up in the Vatican that helps protect the world from supernatural threats. She also revealed a lot about the history behind Vlad and Lilith. Vlad had made a deal with her shortly before he was ultimately killed in battle. She found his corpse and turned him into the first official vampire. He and his kind were supposed to be her slaves for eternity, until he did what almost all of Lilith's servants eventually do. He ran away and created an army, all because he loved the new species that he desired too much to let them be slaves. They rebelled and won their freedom, but Lilith doesn't forget, nor does she forgive. She even killed his first wife, Carmilla, and tried to kill their daughter too. I guess it didn't work. After Vlad left, I guess she determined that free will was useless in a servant. She made some revenants, and a war broke out. A war that still rages to this day. Vlad has seen his fair share of problems. He used to like humans. He was an ally at one point in time. But that all ended when one of his kind traveled to London and murdered a small child. That brought the attention of Jonathan Harker and Sonia's father, a man called Van Helsing. This all happened about 5 years ago. Jonathan Harker and Van Helsing led a military expedition that killed more than half of Vlad's kind, which is part of the reason he hates humans so much. Vlad retaliated by killing Jonathan after turning and raping his wife. Van Helsing retaliated to this by killing Harker's turned wife after she'd given birth to 2 children, Darius and Anna. Vlad killed Helsing. Then Helsing's 2 children, Sonia and Jackson, went after all vampire kind. Megan describes it as some kind of fucked up cycle. I didn't ask about Jackson. I figured it wasn't her story to tell. Plus, I've got a pretty decent idea of what happened. I think the vampires may be a bit more human than they realize. Megan's also keeping the necklace in a wooden box in her dresser. I think she's trying to keep it hidden from Lilith. So long as she doesn't touch it. Right? July 24th, 1899. We all got drunk together last night. Everyone except Willie. It was definitely an interesting experience seeing Wyatt open up a bit. He's a funny guy. He really is. He's just sad. Everyone here is. The more I pay attention, the more I can see the tragedy that seems to lace everyone's lives. Even mine. I literally died. And I may have the least depressing story here. Wyatt confirmed what we all knew. The legends were mostly true, other than being raised by wolves. He was actually raised by a doctor that lived near a pack, one that he found himself spending more and more time with growing up. His wolves killed each of the Confederates who killed his mother. Now they traveled, helping people whenever and wherever they could. The black one, Duke, is very friendly. He likes bones and a good belly rub. The other 2 keep their distance from everyone else, typically sitting in the doorways of whatever room Wyatt resides in. Willie describes it as them protecting their alpha. I asked about Duke. As it turns out, Duke is only a puppy that also happens to be a hellhound, one of the last left on Earth. He'll be as big as a horse when he's done growing. Apparently, some hunters killed his parents shortly before Wyatt and his other 2 wolves found him. That was 15 years ago. Sonia didn't speak for most of the night. It was mostly Atkins, Hiroshi, Megan, Wyatt and me. Willie sat in the room, but all he did was read that newspaper. He's got a strange sadness about him. One that I've only just noticed. I'm tempted to ask, but I'm not sure I want to impose. August 15th, 1899. Megan woke me up in the middle of the night. Ken, you need to get up. There's something going on. I slid out of our bed and groggily got to my feet. She led me through the hotel until we reached the lobby, where Sonia had her pistol aimed at a man that was standing at the doorway. A man I recognized. Darius, Vlad's boy. He stood there in a black trench coat with his hand resting on the handle of his sword. How the hell did you find us? Sonia growled. Megan bought the building. My father owns half the city, he said calmly. What do you want? Megan asked. Deliver a message. Message? Sonia asked. One of Wyatt's dogs growled from the corner of the room. Darius rolled his eyes and tilted his head. Yes, Vlad's run into some trouble with Lilith. She seems to have gathered an army of revenants around 400 strong. She's completely destroyed every mining town we own. Father wants a truce. Daddy wants the medallion. I grimaced. Darius smiled at me, showing his pointed teeth. Daddy wants his people to survive. And what's to stop us from blowing you in half? Megan asked. Darius shrugged. Nothing. I came alone. But if I don't come back with an answer, Vlad may come looking for one. I could feel myself grumbling under my breath. And what happens if we say no? Asked Megan. We all sit and wait for Lilith to come massacre the city. Or maybe we will come take the necklace by force. It doesn't really matter to me. I'm just an emissary. Now, Do you want to do this or not? We'll think about it, Megan said. Darius shrugged. You know where to find us. You have until tomorrow evening. Darius turned and walked out of the building. I held my breath as we all looked at Megan. What are we doing? Asked Sonya. We're not about to help them? Asked Hiroshi. No, but we can't let Lilith come here either. Megan rubbed her chin as she thought for a second. We can't get into a gunfight in the street here either, I pointed out. I say we go to Colonel Grayson and set up a trap, said Atkins. That could work. The only problem is, she was cut off by a loud crash from above us. What was that? I asked. Megan's eyes got large. My room! We all sprinted up the stairs. As we made our way to the 4th floor, upon arriving in the hallway just outside of Megan's room, we found another familiar face. The face of Moria, as she held Hiroshi up against the wall by his throat. 2 vampires in black flanked her. I instinctively raised my new revolver and fired. The bullet whisked through one of her guardman's skull, and his body crumpled to the floor. Megan raised one of her hands, and the other guardsman went tumbling down the hallway until he exploded through the wall. Moria snarled at us as Jack and Vlad stepped out of the room behind her. Vlad had the wooden box in his hands and a wicked grin across his face. Sonya raised a rifle and opened fire, but Moria threw a grey pellet onto the floor, and it exploded, sending a white cloud of smoke into the hallway. No! Megan shouted as she charged forward into the smoke. We were too late, however, as Vlad and Moria were gone, wooden box and all. I growled under my breath. We found Hiroshi on the floor. His throat had been slit with a silver knife, and he was coughing up specks of blood. Shit, Atkins grumbled as he and I knelt around him. Hiroshi didn't really get any words out. He just stared at the ceiling with 2 terrified eyes before he stopped breathing altogether. I could hear Atkins exhale. Megan charged forward into the room. Sonya was last through the smoke, and she covered her mouth with her hand as tears welled up in her eyes. The smoke started to dissipate behind her. That was when I noticed the looming figure in the clearing smoke. My eyes grew large as I went to raise my gun, but I couldn't get a clean shot. That was when one of Jack's knives exploded out of her chest. Her blood splattered all over my face. Some even got into my mouth. It tasted like iron. Sorry, sis, Jack whispered into Sonya's ear. Jack cackled as he held Sonya up with his knife. I stood up with my weapon still trained on him. That was when Megan stepped out from the hallway and gasped. How could you? I demanded. It was relatively easy. All I had to do was thrust. We followed Jack as he backed up to a nearby window. He was careful to keep his head directly behind hers, as to keep me from getting a clear shot like I had on Hector. He didn't let go until he backed up into the window. That was when he shoved her hard into us and jumped out from the window. Megan caught Sonya and lowered her to the ground. She seemed more heartbroken than anything. I don't understand, she whimpered. She looked confused, like she couldn't believe what was happening. Don't talk, Megan pleaded. The life in Sonya's eyes very quickly started fading. Stay with me, Megan pleaded even harder. It was no use though. Sonya died right there on the spot. Our group was suddenly down to 2 members, and we hadn't even gotten to put up a fight. Sonya? Willie's voice asked from behind us. He and Wyatt had just made it up the stairs. I turned and shot him a death glare. Why didn't you help them? I growled. I can't. There are rules, Ken. God damn your rules, Atkins spat. Ken, it's okay, Megan said softly. I got to my feet. It's not. Vlad's got that fucking necklace, and we don't know what he's doing with it. Yes, we do, said Megan. I turned and eyed her. When Vlad rebelled from Lilith, he needed to create an army. We helped him turn a slew of peasants and farmers into vampires. But it wasn't enough, and we couldn't turn people fast enough. He had talked about summoning an army. He said that he had made a deal with someone to summon something called the White Wolf. The White Wolf? I asked. We don't know what it is, said Willie. Well, we have some theories. Vlad was always obsessed with them. He called them the corrupted hounds of God. What now? Asked Atkins. They're similar to werewolves, and we think this white wolf may be the first of their kind, said Megan. Similar to werewolves? I asked. Werewolves can turn back into humans. These things cannot. They're like a virus that just keeps spreading and spreading. We fought an outbreak shortly after the Black Plague, said Willie. I rolled my eyes. So what are we supposed to do? Well, the White Wolf is in Purgatory. The door to Purgatory is in a mine shaft 10 to 15 miles away, Megan said softly. Which is why we recruited Colonel Grayson. He set up his troops outside of there. We only have to meet him, added Willie. I could hear Atkins grumble something behind me while I took my hat off and rubbed my head. So, another fight? Always was gonna be, Atkins muttered. I could hear Wyatt let off a soft laugh from his end of the hallway. We're all gonna fucking die. August 17th, 1899. We arrived at Colonel Grayson's camp yesterday evening. He's got around 50 men and a couple of Gatling guns. Colonel Grayson is an older stout man with big eyes, a graying head of hair. He's from a small town in Oklahoma and somehow fought for the North in the Civil War, despite only being around 14 around the time it ended. When we met Colonel Grayson, he was bathing in a nearby river. The man had no shame as he walked out to greet us, buck-ass naked. Well, hello there, the man shouted as he walked up to shake Willie's hand. Willie looked him up and down and then turned to Megan, who was doing her best to avert her eyes. The colonel looked at Megan, then promptly covered up. Well, shit, I didn't see you there. Captain Haskins, can you bring me a towel, please? A black soldier that was fully clothed and sitting in a chair whilst reading a book stood up and launched a towel at the colonel, who wrapped it around his waist. Grayson pointed at him. That's my number 2. Bit of an asshole. A hell of a shot. Grayson laughed as he started walking towards his tent. Captain Haskins shot up a middle finger at him. Grayson waved it off. So, you guys got it bad with the Tippis Mining Corporation. Bunch of asshats they are. They fucking forced my family out of their houses in Oklahoma. Inside of Grayson's tent was just like any normal military tent that I'd ever been in. It was the closest to the creek out of the entirety of the tent city his men had created. It was also a bit smaller than I'd imagined. Maybe it was because we were all cramped inside of it. We all stood around a table with a map of the area, including a very detailed map of one of the Tippis mines, which so happened to be the very one we were targeting. We'd been watching it ever since you idiots got in touch with us. They've always had a heavy security presence, but since yesterday, it's nearly doubled. Is Vlad there? Asked Megan. Nah, not yet. I wonder what he's waiting for. I asked out loud. Lilith, Willie said dryly. Lilith? Asked Grayson. The archdemon, first of her kind, Megan said. Grayson laughed. Oh, her. How do you reckon she'd do against a Gatling gun loaded with silver ammo? Wait, do you know about all the supernatural shit going on? Asked Atkins. Grayson straightened himself up. The United States government is very aware of the happenings inside of its borders. That's why I'm here. Although the US government would rather keep the happenings here a classified matter, we ain't looking to be in no history books, and we certainly don't want no vampire terrorist attack on a major city. Grayson looked at me. You're an Omega soldier? A what? I asked. A chosen, I think they're called. Yes? You know they all die terrible deaths? Grayson asked with a sly smile. I rolled my eyes. So I've been told. As it turns out, the mine is surrounded by around 20 of Vlad's black guardsmen, with even more on the way. I sat in as Grayson and Willie came up with a plan to take the mine and then turn around and defend it from a siege until we can get the necklace back from Vlad. After which, Megan will use it to send Vlad and Lilith to the far ends of Purgatory. Then we need to collapse the mine to keep everyone away from the door. Making a coherent plan is difficult. There are a lot of things that we haven't accounted for. We don't know when Lilith is going to get here. We also don't know if Vlad's gonna be here before we can take the mine. We needed more information. August 21st, 1899. Megan and I have been in the actual city of Colorado Springs for a day and a half now. When we arrived, our task was to go and get eyes on Tipp's headquarters, where we imagined that Vlad was sitting and waiting while his scouts tried to track Lilith. His headquarters was a large, multi-story brick building with a sign that said Tipp's Mining Corporation on a big wooden sign across the top. We watched it from across the street. The streets were busy. There was an abundance of people wandering around, doing differing things. We could see that there were 2 black guardsmen posted at the door. We pondered breaking in and finding the necklace, but we knew that we probably wouldn't find it in time. All we could do now was wait for a miracle. The miracle came a few hours later in the form of Anna Tippis, who we watched walk out the front door on her own. She turned and started making her way down the street. Megan looked at me and nodded. I followed while Megan stayed. Tracking Anna was easy, almost too easy. I followed her for multiple blocks before she suddenly ducked into an alleyway. I gave chase and followed, where I found her waiting for me with a stern look on her face. I pulled my revolver and aimed it at her head. "Is that necessary?" she asked. I responded as I pulled the hammer back. Anna rolled her eyes. "Okay, I saw you guys watching the building. I'm assuming you're trying to gather information." "We're trying to stop your father from unleashing some shit on this country," I sneered. Anna nodded. "So am I. Lilith is gathering masses of revenants. Our best guess is that she will be here in around 2 weeks. When that happens, Vlad is going to be waiting at the Purgatory door, but I'm sure you already know that." I raised a brow and lowered my pistol. "Why are you helping me?" "If Vlad unleashes this thing, he's going to start a war he can't win. Both Moria and I agree that we'd rather our species survive." "Then why not just force him out? Why are you still following him?" Anna shrugged. "He's our dad, and he's made up his mind. You can thank the Helsings for that. Now, I need to get back before Moria's distraction of my father is finished." "You traitorous little bitch!" a voice called out from the rooftop. Anna's eyes widened as we turned and looked skyward. Darius stepped off of the roof with his sword drawn. He landed in the alleyway between us. "Our father loved you the most, and this is how you repay him?" Darius growled. I raised my pistol at him, but he ignored me. You know he's not well, Darius. He's our father." Dracula Jr.? I've got a gun on you," I said. Darius spun around to face me. "I'm not talking to you yet," he spat. His eyes shot past me and widened. That was when his body was suddenly flung against the wall by an unseen force. He hit it with a hard splat. I turned around to see Megan standing behind me with her hands out in front of her. Darius was pinned against the wall by her powers. "We can't let him leave," I said. Anna looked a bit dumbfounded before she straightened herself back up. "I'll tell him you guys abducted him. I couldn't stop you if I tried. Just make sure he doesn't die before we stop my father. Please?" I looked at her and nodded, then turned to Megan, who seemed almost as confused as me. "Take us back to camp," I said. August 24th, 1899. Darius is a loyal son. I'll give him that. The man hasn't said a word since we locked him up. Not that we need him to. We're just going to be using him as a bargaining chip, a way to keep Vlad at a distance. Willie interrogated him the moment we brought him back. Darius only gave him a stone-cold stare. Atkins seems to be getting along with this Grayson fella. I guess since they both served with the Union, they have a lot to talk about. We're currently planning to take the mine in 4 days. With Darius as a hostage, we might be able to do it without firing a shot. Vlad hasn't figured out where we are yet. If he had, I think we would have been hit by now. I know that he burned down Megan's hotel yesterday. I guess they're not in the mood for mercy. I don't think they ever have been. August 27th, 1899. We woke up last night to barking and snarling, which was very quickly followed by screaming. I jumped out of bed and ran outside to meet whatever was going on. We found Duke and another of Wyatt's wolves ripping into a black guardsman's throat. The black guardsman was a scout. I would have thought that a vampire would have been able to escape the jaws of a wolf, but I guess Wyatt had put silver caps on their teeth. Those wounds wouldn't heal if the vampire didn't drink some human blood. We found him struggling on the ground. Wyatt called his dogs off with a whistle, and I shot the vampire in the head to end its misery. Willie arrived shortly after. He eyed me inside. We need to go ahead and push our attack. If there is one, there's probably more, he growled under his breath. Grayson gave the orders, and we all went to work to prep for an assault that we're riding towards a day early as I write this. Hopefully, I can finish it after this fight is done. August 28th, 1899. God, what a fucking shit show that turned out to be. We launched the attack at sunup. The air was humid and sticky. The area surrounding the mine shaft was heavily guarded, as we expected. It was almost fortified with a wall made from sharpened wooden sticks surrounding it. The wall was also manned every few feet by black guardsmen. The plan was to use Darius to get them to open the front gate, and then use sharpshooters to take out the guards on the walls before shooting our way inside. It started with Megan escorting Darius up the dirt road and to the front gate. I looked on from a distance with Atkins standing next to Wyatt and me. Grayson and his men had surrounded the area. I pulled my pistol. Megan approached the gates with Darius in front of her. I'm not sure what was said, but the gates were opened. Grayson gave the command, and the sharpshooters all opened fire. Several of the guards were shot down quickly. I ran straight for Megan with Atkins and Wyatt hot on my tail. Megan was levitating Darius a few inches above the dirt. No one dared shoot in her direction. Wyatt and I ran past her and through the gate. I went through it first. My eyes instinctively shot through the shaft opening, where a guardsman wheeled out a Gatling gun. I raised my gun and fired. The guardsman's head exploded. "Keep moving," Atkins shouted behind me. I ran past the Gatling gun and into the dark void. I could hear the gunfight raging behind us. We traversed a couple hundred feet of the darkened tunnel before we came to a wide opening. It was well lit, having torches set up on several of the walls. The rock around was a dark brown color, but it reflected the light well. The monolith at the end of the opening was pretty tall, and it stretched the height of the room. It was a giant stone slab with symbols I didn't recognize carved into the outer edges of it. There were 2 vampires waiting in the room. I shut them down as soon as I entered. I stopped to take in the monolith. It was incredibly smooth, with a hole that was shaped like the necklace on its left edge. We cleared the camp. Grayson and his men are setting up as we speak, Megan said as she walked into the room with Darius behind her. "You're all gonna die," Darius laughed as he passed us. "You first," Atkins said. I looked over at Megan, who walked up to the monolith and touched it. "I've never been so close to it," she mumbled. "We need to set up the charges," Willie said as he arrived in the room. I turned to Wyatt, who was pulling a leather satchel full of dynamite off of his back. Step 1 of the plan had gone off without a problem. Step 2 wouldn't. We put enough dynamite in the mineshaft to metaphorically collapse the mountain. Grayson and I spent the next few hours setting the Gatling guns up. We had 3 of them now. We put 2 inside the mineshaft and 1 on the wall. The idea being that we would have to retreat and force the enemy into a choke point. The defenses seemed solid, and we knew we could probably hold out for a few hours, maybe even long enough for us to get the necklace from Vlad. I'm still unsure of how we're going to pull that one off. I was standing at the gate, keeping watch, when Atkins approached me from behind. "So I've been meaning to ask, how'd you go from not trusting them to sleeping with Megan?" he asked with a smile. I turned to him with a smirk. "What makes you think I trust him?" Atkins shrugged a bit. "You two seem to hang around each other a lot. I was just a bit curious. Besides, you seem ready to jump into this fight again." "Well, a certain one-armed man told me that we gotta fight for the world we live in. I thought you were retiring." Atkins turned to me and smiled. "I am. I just gotta make sure you don't die again." It was as I chuckled that I caught movement from the trees from the corner of my eyes. A silhouette that I recognized. My eyes grew large as I turned to Atkins. I couldn't believe that you were already here. "Shit!" I shouted as the revenant's gun went off. Atkins was hit square in the chest. A giant hole the size of a melon was blown through him. I turned and raised my pistol at the revenant as he walked down the dirt road ahead of me. Only, he wasn't alone. He was flanked on either side by other revenants. Both of them looked like undead gunslingers as well. I could feel the rage burning in my stomach. I fired my pistol, blowing a hole through one's chest and then aiming at the main revenant's head. It already had its pistol aimed in my direction, but before either of us could shoot. A tornado that looked as if it was made from fire burned a scorching path as it roared out of the gate behind him. The main revenant ran off the road while the other was swallowed by its warpath. "Close the fucking gate!" I growled as I turned and ran to Atkins. The man who'd mentored me for the last few years was suddenly a corpse. There was nothing I could do to save him. I cursed as I slammed my fist into the dirt. "What the hell was that?" asked Wyatt. "Lilith making her presence known, which means there's going to be a 3-way battle raging through here any minute now," Willie grumbled. That was 3 hours ago. It's dusk now, and we haven't heard squat. Grayson and his men have been quiet, other than Haskins, of course, who seems to be under the impression that we're all gonna fucking die. He's right though. I think most of the people here believe him. Megan's been trying to comfort me. I really appreciate the effort, but I'm not sure I want to be comforted by anyone. I can't believe Atkins is gone. I can't believe he died like that. I hope to God I'm the first one that revenant thing runs into. I'm gonna blow its fucking head off. I've thought about walking away, putting this whole thing behind me. But I can't now. We only got one world. It's shit. But we gotta fight for it. I'll probably be dead in a few hours anyway. August 30th, 1899. I have no clue where I am. Well, I do, but I don't. It was around evening time when we started to hear intense gunfire from the woods around us. I gritted my teeth as I waited from one of the wall's corners. I couldn't see any muzzle flashes yet. There was definitely a fight raging in the woods. Megan walked up next to me as we watched. I could smell the corpses as they moved throughout the woods ahead of us. It seems Lilith's and Vlad's forces are facing off, she said. Good, make it easier to kill who's left, I grumbled. Megan gave me a worried glance. I could hear Wyatt's dogs growling from behind me. They could smell the blood in the air. I know this, cause I could smell the irony tang too. It took about 10 minutes before we got our first glimpse of the enemy. That being in the form of a few revenants armed with farming equipment. They came marching out of the woods at a walking pace, right in front of the fort. "Steady!" Grayson commanded. A loud gunshot rang out. Grayson's head suddenly snapped backward as he fell to the ground. I backed up into the fort, taking Megan with me. 2 soldiers slammed the gate close behind us. The revenants all charged. The men on the walls opened fire with their rifles, and all hell broke loose. Haskins was on the Gatling gun, spraying down revenants left and right. But it just wasn't enough. The men only had bolt-action rifles. It didn't take long for the horde to reach the walls. Men were yanked down screaming. Megan and I stood just inside the gate when the first of the revenants came over the walls. I shot down a few that came my way before turning and watching as 2 revenants with axes tore into Haskins. That was when the gate was torn down. A flood of death came charging through. I fired my pistol as fast as I could, but for every 10 I put down, 10 more would take their place. Megan conjured up walls of flames from next to me, scorching the dead and catching the wooden wall on fire. That was when the bright red beam of energy tore through a wall to our left. I turned with my pistol raised. Lilith stood there, with a sadistic smile on her face, as she locked eyes with Megan and I. "I thought I smelled Merlin's magic," she hissed as she stepped through. Megan didn't hesitate, raising her hands and unleashing a torrent of flames in Lilith's direction. But Lilith simply walked through them with an even bigger smile on her face. "Feels like home," she said as she stepped forward. I remembered what Willie had said about my revolver. I aimed it and fired. If it hurt the archdemon, she didn't show it. I could feel my chest tighten as Megan grabbed me and yanked my arm. We sprinted back into the mine shaft, the dead nipping at our metaphorical heels. We ran past the 2 remaining soldiers that manned the Gatling guns inside. They opened up the moment we passed them, unleashing volleys of lead into the horde behind us. The choke point worked for maybe a few seconds before the Gunslinger Revenant's gun echoed throughout the mine. Twice. If anything, their sacrifice bought us a few more seconds. Wyatt waited for us at the monolith, with a repeating rifle aimed at the cave behind us. Darius had been tied to one of the walls with silver restraints. He cackled as we entered. "What a stand you made. Already retreating." I eyed the monolith, and then Megan began turning and staring straight down the darkened tunnel, where a figure approached slowly. A figure with glowing red eyes. The Confederate Revenant stepped out, the horde walking close behind him. He and I locked eyes for a moment. He'd holstered both his gun at some point between killing the men on the Gatling guns in here. I eyed him. The next moment happened in slow motion. He reached for his. I yanked mine and fired. The Revenant racist's head exploded. The other Revenants charged. I was ready to make a last stand. I honestly thought that I was going to die at that exact moment. Until Megan stepped in front of me and sent a massive wall of flames careening down the mine, incinerating everything in its path. Everything except her. Lilith stood there in the entranceway, with her tendrils aimed at us. She didn't seem bothered, more impressed, really. "Do you know how much time it takes to raise an army like that?" she asked. "Duke!" Wyatt growled. A snarling mass of black fur raced past me. Duke went skyward as to try and rip Lilith's throat. But the wolf was slapped away with a tendril. Lilith unleashed another beam at us. I wanted to jump out of the way, but I didn't have the time. The beam suddenly reflected off of something. I caught Megan straining in the corner of my eye. She had put up some kind of invisible energy shield, but she was struggling to keep it up. "We don't need to fight. I'm here for Vlad, not you," Lilith sneered as she redirected the beam to the ground beneath where the three of us were standing. The next thing I knew, I was careening through the air, bouncing off of a nearby wall and into the dirt below. My vision had become a bit groggy after that. I could see Lilith turn her attention to Darius, who looked horrified. "You're Vlad's spawn. Are you Carmilla's or Mina's?" "Fuck you," Darius growled. "Ah, Mina's." A black tendril shot out and snatched Darius by his throat. "You seem like a nice boy. It's too bad you have to die." Then came the voice. "Put him down." I raised my head to see Vlad standing behind Lilith. The medallion was raised at her. Vlad was bright pink with rage. Lilith only laughed at this. "Well, well, well. The prodigal son returns." "Let him go," Vlad sneered as Moria and Jack approached them from behind. "Come on now, you won't send us both to Purgatory," Lilith sneered as she held Darius up by his throat with her tendril. Vlad's son strained hard. "Just you, Lilith," Vlad said as the ruby in the center of the medallion started to glow red. Lilith shrugged before another of her tendrils shot its way through Darius's brain, showering the walls in red paint. Vlad's screams echoed throughout the mine as a red light blinded me. When I got my vision back, Megan was on her feet. Lilith was gone, presumably sent to Purgatory by the medallion. But Vlad, he had a furious expression on his face, one that was directed at Megan. "This is your fault," he snarled. "Vlad, don't," Megan pleaded. "Don't what? I'm opening the monolith. I will have what is mine. Now move." "I can't let you do that," Megan said. Vlad seemed to consider this for a second before he raised the medallion at Megan, the ruby glowing red. "I just lost a son. I won't lose everything else." I found myself living in slow motion again. My heart rate was low. I reached for my pistol, but I dropped it. I only had a few milliseconds to formulate a plan. I couldn't let Vlad send her to Purgatory. Not her. She was our best chance at winning this. So I acted. I got to my feet and leapt in front of the beam. It hit me in the back. The last thing I saw before everything went black was Megan's shocked expression. The next thing I knew, I was here, sitting in Purgatory, writing in a journal that no one is ever going to find. It's strange here. This place is a jungle. I haven't gone exploring much. When I arrived, I found myself in a small clearing. The leaves and foliage around me were a mixture of green, red, and strangely enough, blue. It was also night. There's 2 moons in the sky above me right now. One is white. The other is a strange shade of orange. I sat there for a few hours pondering my next move. I got up and walked for maybe 30 minutes. Eventually, I came to a stream. The water was cold. I don't know if it'll make me sick or not, but I figure I'm gonna need it. I've been sitting here ever since, on a random rock. I've heard a few distant screeches from creatures I don't recognize. Lilith's out here somewhere. So is this white wolf they told me about. And God knows what else. I wish I had my gun on me. I really do. I hope Megan and the others made it out of that mine. I hope Anna came through, and they found a way to beat Vlad. I hope they come and find me. Or maybe they shouldn't. Maybe I fulfilled the plan that my dad thought God had for me. I don't know. I don't even know where I am. But I do know one thing. I'm scared.